Obviously, the next speaker. Welcome back, beautiful, amazing human beings. I hope you guys had a good and amazing break. You guys are in for a very, very special treat coming up right now with the next speaker. One of the most important, one of the most things that are most pivotal in our society to do is to share knowledge and information. And this next speaker has done that in so many incredible ways, being selfless, being viciously attacked by the mainstream media, but time and time again keeping his head up straight, speaking truth to power for decades and never stopping. I sincerely want to thank this next speaker. He has inspired me, passed down important information that has been with me for a while. The saying, "You are the imagination of yourself," has always stuck with me for a very young age, ever since I was listening to this next speaker speak. And it has brought me to the position of where I am right now. Before we actually introduce this speaker, we have a trailer for his next movie, Renegade, which is coming out this May. We're going to play it right now.
People say I talk about some weird stuff, some far out stuff. But how about that chair that you're sitting in? Isn't solid. How weird is that? This reality is nothing like we think it is.
My next guest is David Icke. He describes himself as a full-time investigative journalist searching for the truth of what's really going on in the world. David, good morning.
Ollie, right? I set out on a world speaking tour in the summer of 2016 because I could feel that more and more people were starting to feel uneasy about the world.
You realize that there is a whole awakening movement around the world.
This is giving truths out there that plant a seed.
Ladies and gentlemen, can you welcome on stage David Icke? Thank you! Thank you! Whoa. Thank you!
If I have to be stopped.
To stop you telling lies.
It's becoming more and more of a challenge to find places to speak without it being cancelled. My website is blocked in schools and universities and colleges. The system is desperate to silence what I'm putting out. Why?
They're laughing at you. They're not laughing with you.
We were ridiculed beyond belief. Press camped outside the house, followed us on holidays.
Yes, I know people put a lot of work into conspiracy theories, but I still think they're actually intellectually lazy.
Have you read any of my books?
No.
How do you know that it's intellectually lazy? If I had not let go of this concern what other people think, does anybody think I would have talked and written about some of the things I have since? No way!
When I saw what Icke is doing, I was a bit jealous of him. Wow, look at what this guy's doing.
I love his mind. I don't know if anybody else could do it but him, actually.
We are in a period now where speaking your truth is not just important, it's utterly crucial to where humanity goes from here.
I mean, what kind of world are those kids going to live in?
If we go on as we are, but we're not going to. Much as that will distress those that wish it to happen. Good. The world needs renegades, and it needs them now.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to David Icke.
What a welcome in Mexico. I remember Mexico covering the World Cup in Mexico City in 1986. Mexico, Mexico, rah, rah, rah. The film, Renegade, I don't know why they called it Renegade, is coming out in May, but there's some premieres, they call them. Sounds a bit bloody grand, doesn't it? In the end of March. One in Los Angeles, one in New York, one in Toronto, and then a couple in Britain, in Manchester and London. And the idea is that you get the interest in the film and people see the information they've not come across before. Now, today, I've got 4 hours. I'm going to do 3 in a 1. And that, for me, is like the middle of the second sentence, you see. So, I've got to get on and I've got to compact it, but what I want to do is connect an enormous amount of dots. Because dots, situations in and of themselves look one way, connect them, they look a totally different way. But I'm going to start with the bottom line of all of it, without which we really can't understand what's happening. And that is, the world is mad, completely bloody bonkers, and if you try to make sense of it, in the sense of it must be you, then you'll never understand it. The world is insane, but it's meant to be. There's method in the madness. And because it's mad, I have to start with an apology. Because I don't want to upset anybody, and I don't want to exclude anybody, and you know, I don't want to not be politically correct. So I've got an apology to start off. I would like to apologise to anyone I've not yet offended. Please be patient. I will get to you shortly. Hopefully by the end of the afternoon. Because we now have a new religion called I Am Offended. The new religion that's taking over the world. I don't quote Churchill very much, but this is brilliant. Some people's idea of free speech is they are free to say what they like, but anyone says anything back, that's an outrage. And as Orwell said, if liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they don't want to hear. And that is a right we must not concede. We are creating generations who are born to be offended. And I can reveal today the absolute foolproof cure for being offended. Choose not to be, because that's all it is, a choice not to be offended. But there's a reason, which we'll come to later, while everyone now is being encouraged to be offended about everything because of what comes from that, and I'll get to later. Gandhi said, no one can hurt me without my permission, and we need to stop giving it. I'm still offended. And offended about what? What do people get offended about? All these irrelevant fault lines that divide us, of race, of religion, politics, gender, culture, bloody labels. Labels for everything. And it's that which is played off against each other to create divide and rule, and it's that which gets people offended. The new religion of I am offended is really the religion of I am Ma. I am Ma. The world is controlled by I am Ma. And what I mean is, I am Ma, man, woman, black, white, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, middle class, working class, age, date and birth date. These are the irrelevant labels that divide us. I am a label. I have fallen into label consciousness. I am a phantom self. Someone who self-identifies with the labels of what I am currently and in such a short time experiencing, instead of self-identifying with the infinite I consciousness that is having the experience. That division is what holds humanity in servitude. Because the new religion of I am offended is really the religion of fake self-identity. And look at it. These labels are being subdivided and subdivided and subdivided into the greater and greater minutiae of detail. And we have a situation now where, who am I? Who am I? I'll have a look. Because who we are is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller in terms of our self-identity. Give you an example. This is an identity code used by an American university. Hello, nice to meet you. Who are you? Oh, I'm LGBTQQFAGBBDSM. Oh, nice to meet you. I'm Dave. But where does it end? What about left-handed people? They are a minority who must not be excluded. So we'll have them in. and then there's people with ingrowing toenails. I've had one, they hurt. You can't exclude them. That will be excluding an oppressed minority. So we'll have you in there. There you go. And then there's I'm sexually attracted to Christmas cakes. All right then. We'll have you there. You're a CC. On we go. On and bloody on. And because there's 26 letters in the alphabet, you can use the letters as many times as you like, there is no end to this. And clearly there's not. And what is it doing? It's taking us further and further away from identity with the consciousness that we are, to these labels, getting smaller and smaller. The real I is simply awareness, a state of being aware. The awareness that's having the experiences we give labels to but believe is who we are. The awareness that leaves the body when the cycle is over, and we are points of attention within an infinite state of awareness. But the more we focus that attention on the minutiae of self-identity, the more we lose connection with the real I, awareness. So, we self-identify with these bodies, with these labels, with these races, with these religions, with these income brackets. And that focus of attention disconnects us from an influence by the greater I, which any of us can connect with, if only we choose to. So there's nothing at all wrong with different experiences and different races and different colors, different religions and all the rest of it, so long as we don't self-identify the entirety of the I with that. Because if we do, we are a divider and rulers party trick. It's become so easy. Labels enslave us. Seeing through their illusion will set us free. And if you break it down, seeing through those illusions is all that will set us free. I am you, you are me. What is race? Same consciousness, different color vehicle, that's all it is. What is sexuality? Same consciousness, different experience. It's not the color of our skin that makes us different, it's the color of our thoughts, or as Martin Luther King brilliantly said, it's not the color of our skin, it's the content of our character. And yet, we now have this great inversion, a world where everything is turned upside down. Everything, virtually. A world of inversion in which those that shout racist the loudest are those most obsessed with race. When I see someone, I see their consciousness having an experience. The anti-racists see a race. They see their body, they see their color. They're obsessed with it. And yet they call others racist. Another inversion, those who make a fortune from us being sick are the same people who tell us what will make us well. Form of madness. This is a great quote from a guy called Michael Elmer. Just look at us. Everything is backwards. Everything is upside down. Doctors destroy health, lawyers destroy justice, universities destroy knowledge, governments destroy freedom, the major media destroy information, and religions destroy spirituality. That's the crazy, crazy world. The crazy world that we've allowed to manifest, and all those inversions come from one inversion, an inversion of self-identity, from consciousness to the labels that consciousness is experiencing. And you know, people still today think they're free. They're kind of sussing it more, but a lot of people still think they're free because they can vote for masks on the same face every 4 or 5 years. But if you really look at it, if you really look at a human life, what we call freedom is simply a prison cell where we can't see the bars. Because the bars are, until relatively recently, quite well hidden. None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. And that is one of the great techniques of human control. The key to enslavement in many ways, the illusion of freedom, because people do not rebel against not being free when they believe they are. Slavery of the body is easy to see, and we've had a bag full of that. But slavery of the mind is far more difficult to see by comparison. This is a guy called Edward Bernays. He's called the father of PR. He wrote this in 1928. PR, it's called spin today. I call it lying. And we are governed, he said, our minds molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. People are rarely aware of the real reasons which motivate their actions, because they believe and are manipulated to believe they are making the decisions. And how it's done is to turn human life into one big program. When you observe a human life cycle from cradle to grave, unless you wake beyond it, it's one constant perceptual download from the earliest age to the final departure. This is human life from cradle to grave, and I'm going to use the headset as a symbol today of this program. And the more people use these headsets, the more it's not even a symbol. So this is the program. You come out of the womb, and immediately your perceptions are influenced by your parents. Not because they're trying to do you down or be malevolent, but they have been through the process you're about to go through. They bought it, and they are passing it on to you from the earliest age on the basis that they think that's the right thing to do. Then, within what, 4 years? You've only just got here. You've only just popped into the light. And you're already, after 4 years, sitting at a desk 5 days a week while an authority figure representing the state is telling you what is true, what isn't true, what's right, what's wrong, what's good, bad, what's happened, what hasn't happened, what's moral, what's immoral. And you've only just got here, and then that continues all the way through your formative years. Download, 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 day after day after day. And then you leave the education system and something incredible happens. Everything changes. When you were a kid and you were going to school, Your mum would come in the morning and she'd say, "Come on, darling, get out of bed, you'll be late for school. What will the teacher say?" And then it all changes. You leave school, you go out into the adult world. Now your partner comes in the morning. "Get up quick, you're going to be late for work. What will the boss say?" And it's just a continuation of the same program. And then you go to work and you have a family, and then the whole cycle starts again, unless we break out of it. Get them in the maze, keep them there, keep them confused, get them out and get another lot in. This is how the program works. And only people who are willing to not accept the program and not perpetuate it are those that are going to break it. I never let life pass me by. I live in the real world, I do. Sure you do, mate. Sure you do. We're told what to like. We're told what to ask about reality. And we are told, crucially, what to fear. Fear, the four-letter word that controls the world. And this is what the whole thing is about. Controlling perception. For reasons I'll come to, perception is all. Get that, you get basically everything. And how it's done, how this program works, it works on something I call a postage stamp consensus. This is a narrow band of information, sense of the possible, that is taught in the schools, that is broadcast and reported by the media, and so on. It's this narrow band of information. And everything outside it is excluded. You're crazy if you go there. So what is the postage stamp consensus? Well, hold on, I'm just getting it. Yes, bullshit. It's bullshit. It is a tiny fraction of possibility. And yet, that is the download that people receive from cradle to grave. This is normal. Another way of describing the postage stamp: unquestioned belief. Download the program, don't question it, because there's consequences if you do. "Hello, is that Mrs. Smith?" "Yeah, what's up?" It's Johnny. "What's the problem?" "He's asking questions in the classroom." They'll all want to do it. Don't question anything. And kids find early on in school that that's a good way of keeping out of trouble. Another word for the postage stamp is familiarity. You know, we underestimate the programming power of familiarity, because once something becomes familiar, it becomes a gimme. It becomes an everyone knows that, mate. Becomes a this is the real world because of familiarity. So, because school, taking kids at age 4, sometimes less, and putting them in this sausage machine for their formative years, downloading the system's version of everything, that is familiar. So people overwhelmingly don't question it. "Oh yeah, people go to school, that's right, yeah, go to school." Whatever question, there might be other ways of doing it. "Oh no, people go to school." It's a gimme once it's familiar. So the idea is, you put the population in this channel, the postage stamp consensus channel, and you keep them there for the rest of their lives. Gotcha. Imprisoned by the postage stamp. Imprisoned by education that downloads the postage stamp. Get them early, keep them for life. And then there's, oh yeah, that's a good one, thanks. That's a slide which says, I don't know what's going on there, it's never happened before. It says that a study shows that when kids go through school, they lose their imagination, they lose their ability to inquire, they lose their inquisitiveness, because it's meant to be. imprisoned by peer pressure, where people have been through the system, downloaded the postage stamp, taken it as normal, and then insist that everyone else does the same, or there are consequences. It's a form of what I call psychological fascism, which says you must believe what we do, or else there are consequences. Imprisoned by money. You know, people talk about money and they talk about greed, all these people with all this wealth, but it's not really about greed if you go deep enough. It is at certain many levels, but not deep in the shadows, it's not. It's about control. It's about destroying freedom. Why? Because if you look at freedom, what is freedom? On one level, one massive level, it's the ability to make choices. If you can make choices, you are freer than someone who can't. And in the world that we have had structured around us, money dictates who has choice and who doesn't. Thus, money, control of money, who has it and who doesn't, is really about control of choice, which means control of freedom. And then there's imprisoned by surviving, having to serve the system to earn the money, to pay the rent, and keep food on the table. Imprisoned by postage stamp normal. And if you put all that together, it comes down to one simple thing. Imprisoned by perception. This is the stadium on which it's all played out. Control perception, you control humanity. And they do it by pounding out 24/7 on all the forms of media, the program, and trying to batter, discredit, ridicule anyone who is challenging that perception. And if people don't challenge it themselves, then that's their cradle to grave perception. And this is how powerful it is. According to mainstream science, compared with the projected size of the universe, planet Earth is the equivalent of a billionth of a pinhead. But you look at the night sky and you suggest that maybe humans on that billionth of a pinhead might not be the only form of life as we know it. And you get, he believes in little green men, he does. The power of the program and the reflex action responses that come from it. So, it's no surprise that people look at the world bewildered. What's going on? Why does it happen like this? Why does it happen like that? Why do they do that? Because it's all part of the perceptual download. And this is worth remembering. This is a bit of a sobering thought. All the people that run the institutions that dictate the direction of the world, whether it's scientists, doctors, academics, journalists, politicians, they've all been through the same program. They've been through the same download. They're all sitting in the same prison cell. It's just that they've got more influence in it. And so, when you leave school, university, college, whatever, you take that core programming of perception and you go out into the institutions and you meet people there who've been through that system earlier, and everyone is confirming to everyone else that what they believe to be normal and how things are is how things are. And it's all people ever hear. They constantly get confirmation that their perceptions are true because everyone else seems to have them. And thus, it becomes a collective reality when it is simply manipulated, downloaded, programmed bollocks. I'm a politician. Let me tell you what we should do. As if they bloody know. I'm an academic. Let me tell you what to believe. Some of these people who've been through the education system longest are some of the most programmed. I'm a scientist. Let me tell you what reality is. Well, let me tell you what someone's told me reality is. I'm a doctor. Let me heal you. And I love this one. I'm a journalist. Let me tell you what's going on. Oh God, as if they ever would, or if they ever could, most of them. And so, we have the postage stamp consensus version of reality pounded out 24/7 from all these media directions. And you have a situation like these metronomes, they all started at different times, but slowly but surely they all come into line and they sync with each other. Except one on the right over there, second from the front. His name's David, apparently, so they tell me. And this is how it works, people getting battered into submission. And this is the human condition in one word: unconscious. Unconscious beyond the program. Consciousness, awareness. And it's a lifelong hypnotic trance, that's what it is. And we can break out of it anytime we choose. And more people are. Do conscious people get into aircraft and pepper bomb civilians because some bloke with more badges on his uniform tells them to do so? Do conscious people do that? Of course not. Conscious people would never be able to do that. But unconscious people can justify it to themselves. Wake up and see the madness. Great line from Gandhi. Even if you are in a minority of one, the truth is still the truth. And we need to stand up for it and not be intimidated in the silence. And so, this afternoon is about context. It's absolutely vital. We get no context. We get, in and of themselves, people, corporations, world events, and they look a certain way. But when you connect them, they look totally different. And suddenly, the mist clears. We see what is happening, or at least some of it. This is the key. We don't see why it is happening. And it's in the why that the curtains open and the penny drops. The whole point of postage stamp consensus is to keep you in a sense of apartness, so you see the pieces, but you don't see the picture, which happens when you fit the pieces together. But connect the dots between all these apparently unconnected subjects, people, things, and so that's what's going on. So the rest of this first half, I'm going to start connecting dots between apparently completely unconnected things, but they're not. And when you do that, you see that the world of the seen, which is tiny, as I'll come to, is actually controlled from the world of the unseen. And it basically can be symbolized very powerfully as a spider's web. You've got the spider in the center of the web, which is driving the direction of human society, way out of the public arena. And then you've got these strands in the web immediately around the spider. They are the most exclusive secret societies. Many of them don't have names. Makes them harder to identify. You then start coming out from the spider, still in the unseen, still in the hidden, and you start to come across the secret societies we do know about. The Freemasons, I'm talking about the inner core of Freemasons. This compartmentalization keeps most of the people, even in secret societies, from what the hell's going on. The Knights Templar, Opus Dei, the Knights of Malta, Skull and Bones, etc. And you come out to the point which I call the cusp, where the hidden meets the seen. And at that point, you've got secret, mostly semi-secret these days, organizations that are at that pivotal point between the hidden and the seen. I'm talking the Council on Foreign Relations, created in 1921, and has driven so much of US foreign policy ever since. The Bilderberg Group, the Bilderberg Hotel in Oosterbeek, Holland, 1954. Club of Rome, created in the 1960s specifically to use the environment as an excuse to transform global society. Maybe Miss Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez might look up the Club of Rome. The Trilateral Commission, created by David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski, and they were behind the creation of the United Nations, such like Royal Commission of International Affairs is created in London in 1920, still going, also known as Chatham House. And these are gatherings of people from different institutions of politics, of military, of intelligence, of corporations, of banking. And through these organizations, and most of them involved won't even know this. Through those organizations, the spider's agenda is played out into the public arena, the world of the seen. And at that point, we see governments making decisions, we see government agencies making decisions, banks, corporations, media, all of it. And they seem to be random. And they seem to be being made by different people. And many of them will be. I'm talking about the society directing, society transforming decisions. They're not random. They've started out with the spider, and most of the people in the scene playing them out and bringing them into reality don't even know there is a spider. And this is where it's meant to go. And I say meant to go, my God, we don't even have to look into the future now, it's in our face. It's what I call the Hunger Games society, where you have a tiny elite, actually less than 1%, at its peak, who is planned to control everything, all the wealth, all the politics, all the power, and down the bottom is meant to be basically the rest of humanity. Even those people today that think they're okay, this doesn't really matter to them, they got a nice house, a nice job, nice car, and all that stuff. It doesn't matter to me. If you're not part of this 1%, they want what you've got as well. And then in between, in this Hunger Games society, and I've been writing about this now for a long, long time, and look at what's happening, is the police state, actually the military police state, as it's meant to be, and that is designed, and it's coming in, of course, all the time, to hold that status quo, to stop the people at the bottom challenging those at the top and breaking that structure. And this is the political means, or the way it looks politically, this Hunger Games society is where they want to go. A world government dictating to everyone on the planet, a world central bank dictating all global finance, a world currency, cashless, which is happening so fast now, a world army to impose the will of the world government, that's the continuing expansion of NATO, among other things, and a microchip population. But I'm going to go into that more at the end of this section, because we are looking something really in the face now in relation to technology. Under that are designed to be super states. Of course, the European Union is the furthest advanced, and then under that, nation states and regions. And I say regions because the idea is to destroy nation states. So there are no countries as we know them. And these organizations like the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization, they are being created as part of this unfolding world government structure. And there is an end game, kind of hinted at it a few seconds ago. And the end game, end of humanity, well, more accurately, end of humanity as we know it, which is to be achieved by connecting the human mind-brain to artificial intelligence, so artificial intelligence becomes the human mind. This is what's unfolding in front of our face now. I'll come to that later. So when Stephen Hawking, the late Stephen Hawking, said the development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race, he was speaking the truth. But what he wasn't saying is the real story, the end of humanity as we know it. That's the idea. That's where all this has been going all along, as I'll explain when I get into that section later on. So what I'm going to do is go through a 9-point plan, and most of these subjects will appear on the surface to have no connection to the others. We'll see, they bloody well do. And the reason I put control perception next to every one of them is because every one of them is a form of perceptual control and part of this mass perceptual download. Because we have a war on perception. A war on perception not by only information received, but a war on perception by censoring more and more blatantly other forms of information that challenge the program. Because where do people get their perceptions from? How do they form them? From information received. It could be a personal experience, it could be the 10 o'clock news, but it's information. Control information, you control to a vast extent perception. Control perception and focus, and you control everything, especially human behavior, which comes from what? The person's perception leads to behavior. It's not a matter of what is true, this war criminal says, that counts, but what is perceived to be true. That's the stadium, and that's the stadium in which we can take power back from those who have grasped it for so long. The idea is that we do not know, but we do not know that we do not know. Sound like bloody Rumsfeld there, didn't I? So, how do you do that? You give people a fake reality of absolutely everything. And so, as we start our journey through this list, very appropriate we start with this. Control perception by controlling the perception of the reality we are experiencing. Give people a fake understanding of the very reality they are living in. If we don't understand reality, we can't understand anything. What is this place? Where did it come from? What's holding it together? Who are we? Where are we? If we don't understand these basic things, how can we understand anything? Everything else must be flawed if we don't understand that. And look, according to mainstream science, the electromagnetic spectrum is 0.005% of what exists in the universe. Some say it's a bit more, but not much. And it gets even more. Kind of ridiculous. Because the only frequency band that we can see within which everything we call the world exists, in the world of the scene, is in a tiny, tiny band of that 0.005% that scientists call visible light. Everything else, in the entirety of existence, we cannot see with the human eye. So we don't actually live in a world at all. We live in a band of frequency which we can decode into the reality we think we're living in. And there are higher levels of reality, on higher frequencies, we cannot see. And so when you look at the night sky, not only is that a vastness compared with a billionth of a pinhead, it's only what you see in that vastness within a smear of 0.005%. So we live in this infinite state of consciousness, energy, awareness. But while we are having a human experience, we are aware of the tiniest, tiniest fraction. And if you go into this web down to spider levels, they know how this works. They just won't want us to know, for obvious reasons. Now, this is a description of what I'm talking about. Consider that you can see less than 1% of the electromagnetic spectrum, and hear less than 1% of the acoustic spectrum. 90% of the cells in your body carry their own microbial DNA and are not you. The atoms in your body are 99 point, all those 9% empty space. Nothing's empty space really, but it's the appearance of it. And none of them are the ones you were born with. Human beings have 46 chromosomes, 2 less than a potato. The existence of the rainbow depends on the conical photoreceptors in your eyes. To animals without cones, the rainbow does not exist. So you don't just look at a rainbow, you create it in ways I'll come to. This is pretty amazing, especially considering that all the beautiful colors you see represent less than 1% of the electromagnetic spectrum. And we experience it so crazy. We experience the world as A, solid, and B, out there, when it's neither. Just an illusion. The world is not out there. Not as we experience it. The world is in here. When we decode information fields, just like Wi-Fi, into the world that we think we are experiencing outside of ourselves. And it's kind of interesting, if you look at the analogies now, what's happening is technology is mirroring the very reality that we're experiencing. It's why it's so potent in controlling perception. And if you think of a computer screen and you say, okay, the internet, what's the internet? And people say, oh, well, it's graphics and it's colors and it's movies and it's text on the screen. Yeah, it is, but only on the screen. Everywhere else, the internet looks nothing like you see it on the screen. It's information, it's Wi-Fi, it's electronic coding and what have you that goes on. And only when the computer has decoded that information into another form does it become the real world of the internet on the screen. And if I said to somebody who knew nothing about computers, you know, in this room, there is a field of radiation which carries a worldwide reality. And you can tap into it here, or you can tap into it in South Africa, or Australia, or South America, or England, wherever, and you can tap into the same reality. People who knew nothing about computers would say, "You're bloody mad, man. What are you talking about? Where is it? I can't see it." But now, because people know about Wi-Fi and they know about computers, you say the same thing. What do they say? "Oh yeah, Wi-Fi, I know about that, yeah, Wi-Fi." And what is the only difference between "you're mad, mate" and "yeah, I know about that"? Knowledge, information. That's the only difference between that reaction and that one. That's why if you can control information, you control the world, and that's why they're so obsessed with it. So, if we look at that analogy, it's not even an analogy. We live in a reality, a waveform, energetic information, I call it cosmic Wi-Fi, and we are decoding from that this reality, which is a construct that's been created within that energetic information field for us to be enslaved by, or at least to give us a particular experience. And if you don't go beyond the program, then that construct is dictating our reality all the time. So we connect with this information field, this cosmic Wi-Fi, on the waveform level, the electromagnetic level, and then our senses turn that information into electrical information, which is then communicated to the brain, which then decodes it into holographic digital information, which is the world of the scene. This is why the physics of computer games mirror those of our reality. Technology today is mirroring the very reality we're experiencing. And just as a computer decodes Wi-Fi information to a different reality on the screen, so we do it with the cosmic Wi-Fi. And we're interacting with it electromagnetically and electrically. The whole body communicates electrically, the brain communicates and operates electrically, and this is where the interaction goes on. Werner Heisenberg, Nobel Prize-winning physicist, said, "Atoms or elementary particles themselves are not real. They form a world of potentialities or possibilities rather than one of things or facts." And that's what this decoding process is doing. It's taking that realm of possibility and probability, and it is decoding it into a world of perceived things or facts. And what dictates, I'll get to this big time in the second section, what dictates what we pull in and decode and what we don't? Perception. Get perception, you get people's very experience via controlling perception. So, if you look at the five senses, what are they doing? They're taking waveform information from this field and they are turning it into electrical information, which is then communicated to the brain, which decodes it into this digital holographic information we call the world. The ear is an obvious one. It picks up waveform sound waves, turns them into electrical information and passes them to the brain, and then only then do we hear what we think we hear in terms of words, sounds, whatever. And when I'm speaking now, there's no words passing between us. What's passing between us are vibratory information fields, waveform fields, created by my vocal cords. They're picked up by the ear, turned into electrical information, and then the brain decodes them into the words I am saying. And so you have different parts of the brain that specialize in decoding different senses, and then the brain puts that together as a whole that we call the world, taking it from the waveform through to the digital holographic, just like a computer does with Wi-Fi, through the waveform in through the digital. And it's at that digital level that things like numerology work, where people read reality through numbers, and then through to the holographic. And of course, what we're seeing now is more and more advanced holographic technology, which is, for instance, allowing these two guys with the guitars to be projected onto a stage in Florida from London. But you look at some of these holographic technologies now, you'd think, and some people do, you couldn't walk through them, they look so solid. So is this so fantastic what I'm saying when you look at how far virtual reality has become in mirroring the reality that we're experiencing? And people at the cutting edge of this say it won't be long before you won't be able to tell the difference. And what is a computer game doing? It's hacking in to the very same decoding processes through which we create reality. It's hacking into the touch senses, through the gloves, the hearing senses, the sight senses. And even though it's overriding what we might call normal reality through technology, it can seem to those who experience it, incredibly real, just like this. Look how real a dream can appear to be. So human life is like watching an interactive virtual reality movie, and it is interactive. We're affecting it as it's affecting us, just as we are affecting the internet when we post on it, and it's affecting us by what we get from it. So this is a mainstream science magazine. Every second, 11 million sensations, pieces of information, crackle along these brain pathways. The brain is confronted with an alarming array of images, sounds, and smells, which it rigorously filters down until it is left with a manageable list of around 40. Thus, 40 sensations a second out of 11 million received make up what we perceive to be reality. And the brain fills in anything that's not there. So we're told that the world is solid because it's made of atoms. So therefore atoms must have some solidity, otherwise that don't play out at all. It turns out they don't. It's just a great quote. If the nucleus were the size of a peanut, the atom would be about the size of a baseball stadium. If we lost all the dead space inside our atoms, we would each be able to fit into a particle of dust, and the entire human race would fit into the volume of a sugar cube. There is no physical, but there is the decoded illusion of it. And this is a scientist called Robert Lanza, and all he's doing here is describing the process of someone looking at a candle and how it works. The flame is emitting photons, or tiny packets of electromagnetic energy, each pulsing electrically and magnetically. These invisible electromagnetic waves strike a human retina, and if, and only if, the waves happen to measure between 400 and 700 nanometers in length from crest to crest, then their energy is just right to deliver a stimulus to the 8 million cone-shaped cells in the retina. Each in turn sends an electrical pulse to a neighbor neuron, and on up the line this goes at 250 miles per hour until it reaches the optical lobe of the brain, which you saw on that image at the back of the brain here actually, in the back of the head. There, a cascading complex of neurons fire from the incoming stimuli, and we subjectively perceive this experience as a yellow brightness occurring in a place we have been conditioned to call the external world. And does a falling tree make a noise? Only if you hear it, which sounds crazy, but it's not. When a tree falls, it doesn't make a noise. It makes a waveform disturbance in the energetic field. If there's nobody there, that's all it does. If someone's there, their ears pick up the waveform disturbance, turn it into electrical signals, communicate it to the brain, which decodes it into the sound of a tree falling. This is a guy called Alan Watts, a kind of Western mystic, born in Britain and lived most of his time in California. Without the brain, the world is devoid of light, heat, weight, solidity, motion, space, time, or any other imaginable feature. All these phenomena are interactions or transactions of vibrations with a certain arrangement of neurons. And so, this scene in The Matrix was spot on. This isn't real. What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, taste, and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. Now, what if you, deep in the shadows, knew how this worked and knew how to manipulate perception, thus the way the brain decodes reality, so that they decoded the reality that suited your agenda and created a population that was no trouble to you? I say that's what's going on. I'm telling you, it's all real, man. And it seems like it. Just like computer games can seem so real. Ah, he says it isn't real, idiot. And this is how crazy it gets. Even more crazy. There is this scientific belief that the observer decodes reality. I would not say observer, I'd call it something else in a second. But the principle is the same. Well, I don't know what's happened there. Anyway, what we would look at here is how when people are decoding reality, they create the world that they're actually experiencing. And this was a story about, in a mainstream newspaper, about scientists in a study who had concluded that the world as we perceive it only exists when we look at it. It's called the observer effect. The observer effect. That's what science calls it. I call it something else. The decoder effect. Because the act of observation, focus, triggers the decoding mechanism which turns that waveform information into holographic, digital, this world, real world information. And there was another story there about how they found that this act of observation crashed what they call the waveform, crashed the waveform into particle form. And that's precisely what the decoding system does. It changes waveform information into the form that we perceive the physical world. And it's done by decoding. It's not observing, it's decoding. Nobel physicist John Wheeler said, "No phenomenon is a real phenomenon until it is an observed phenomenon." I would say until it is a decoded phenomenon. And this is the real world that people think they live in. And if we can be persuaded that we live in a solid world of total limitation, while those manipulating us know it's nothing like that, then the few are in an incredible position of power, because that's the real world, symbolically, but we see it in totally different terms. So, given that we are experiencing a reality that is completely different to the one we think we're experiencing, no wonder people are confused and bewildered about the world and what the hell's going on. And religion is a great example of how this program works, how this perceptual program works. And I'm not just talking about what my father used to call bricks and mortar religion. I'm talking about the definition, dictionary definition of religion, which includes so much more. If you look at a religion, it is a belief system which has limits. And if you are living in infinite reality, you cannot have limits, otherwise you are confining yourself in a bubble of reality. So a free thinker is Satan's slave. No, it's a free thinker. And if people believe in religion, it's fine, good luck to them. But I would just say this, it's worth considering that we live in a smear of 0.005% of the universe, and we're being asked to believe and accept that all we need to know to understand reality is within the covers or between the covers of a single book. I feel it in my water. I feel there might be just more to know. And like I say, I'm not just looking at religion as it's perceived, but religion as a dictionary definition, which is scrupulous conformity, a system of belief held to with ardor and faith. And on that basis, science, politics, medicine, academia, journalism are all religions based on that conformity. These people are high priests and followers of the postage-stamped religion in all its forms. If the blind lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch. And that's what's been happening to the human race throughout known human history. In the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And this image absolutely encapsulates how it's done. You put the headset program on the target population, but you are not subject to the headset reality. That's how it's done. Socrates in ancient Greece, to know is to know that you know nothing. That is the meaning of true knowledge, because your mind is always open to all possibility. So, the postage stamp consensus is there to keep that closed, so we don't open our minds to all possibility. So, number 2, control perception by hiding the controllers, the ultimate controllers. Are we alone? Don't be daft. Are we alone? So maybe someone ask that question. Do you think we're alone? No. Nah. You know, when you look at that night sky, what you're looking at is basically the Milky Way galaxy within that yellow circle. And not only that, only within the smear visible light of 0.005% within that circle. And they said, until the 1920s, they reckoned, scientists, that there was one galaxy in the universe. The latest, highest estimate, less than 100 years later, 2 trillion. 2 trillion galaxies. I find it works if you give it a kick. That's what I've always found. So there's trillions of galaxies, trillions of stars, trillions of planets, but only life as we know it on this one. And if you say otherwise, little green man and all that stuff. But there are some people, very few, only one I've come across, Tucker Carlson, in the mainstream media, who have been having people on recently, probably in the last 8 months, on his show, Prime Time, who are talking about US military documentation and radar recordings of craft that are not known about in the human arena, and are doing things, not just moving at speeds, but changing directions in those speeds that we have no concept of how it's done. Well, not in the public arena we don't. And he's asking the question, Carlson, on these interviews, why is the Pentagon not interested in investigating its own radar records of this phenomenon? Because they simply don't want us to know. And this is going to be fun, mate, isn't it? This is a picture of 3 UFOs above the pyramids, making the point that none of this is new. When you, and I've done a lot of this in the last 30 years, when you look at the descriptions that ancient cultures were talking about in terms of the gods and what the gods did, they're describing just what UFO people today are describing in terms of their experiences and abductions. Oh, there it is. It's nothing new. It's just a continuation of the same thing, but now we're describing it in different ways. See, once upon a time, they described things in their cultural way. Today, people talk about being taken up in craft, technological craft. If you look at how it was described in religious writings and cultural writings in the past, they talked about people being taken up into the sky on fiery chariots, which was their cultural way of experiencing it. And then you look at the different descriptions of these gods in different cultures, and you find that if you just put aside the different names, they're overwhelmingly describing the same phenomenon. Things like the demons, fallen angels in Christianity, and the archons in the Gnostic belief system, and the jinn in Islamic and pre-Islamic belief systems, they're basically describing the same phenomenon, which people describe today. And I can't go into this in any detail today because I'm connecting a lot of dots, but I go into it in the books in great detail. If you look at the evidence, you find that this reality is being manipulated from the unseen by a force that isn't actually human, which is ultimately behind this whole system. And why don't we see them? Because what the hell can we see with visible light? Virtually nothing. And if they operate outside of that visual frequency band, we ain't going to see them. So, the global spider's web, if you go deep enough into this, the spider, the nature of the spider, is actually a non-human force. And that is what is driving from the deep shadows this control system. That is, as I'll get to later, as planning to assimilate human consciousness into itself. It's why we have to be so aware of what's going on now. And so this force plays out through this great web of secret societies, which are all compartmentalized, so most people even in the secret societies don't know what the ultimate controller is. And in the end, all these different areas of society, if you go deep enough into them, you'll find that this force is behind them. And like I say, it's compartmentalization that keeps people from this. You know, you look at the Freemasons, and the vast majority of Freemasons are on the bottom 3 levels of degree, the blue degrees. And you only go up the degrees if the degrees above you accept you. And so it's a compartmentalized pyramid where most people in it have no clue what it's really all about. Then there's another common theme in relation to these gods in ancient societies and ancient accounts and ancient myths, and that is that the gods created particular bloodlines, which became known as royal bloodlines, to run this reality, this world, on their behalf. And of course, royal bloodlines through history have claimed the divine right to rule. And people have taken that, understandably in the West, to be the Christian God giving them the right to rule. But actually, the word divine comes from the word diva, which is comes from ancient Vedic literature, and diva was a supernatural being. And if you describe these bloodlines that were seeded to rule over humanity, called royal at one time, and you said that they were having the right to rule because of supernatural beings, you're much closer to what people perceive to be the divine right to rule. And of course, you look at religions and ancient societies, and again, it's a common theme of this interbreeding that created this hybrid bloodline. The Nephilim, sons of God, etc. And here's some of them today. They may not all be this hybrid bloodline, but a lot of them definitely bloody are. Others are just gophers for them. But this bloodline now expresses itself in the people who are driving human society. Driving it where? Into this assimilation, into this non-human force. And these bloodlines, these hybrids, have a particular behavior, personality traits, which explains so much about the world. The word psychopath, people think of serial killers, and they are psychopaths, but there are far more psychopaths in the world than just that, and these bloodlines are absolutely ultra psychopaths. And there's something called the hair test, which is a list of character traits, and if you have enough of them, you are officially designated a psychopath. Right at the top is no empathy, no ability to put yourself in the feelings of those you affect. And empathy is the fail-safe mechanism of human behavior. It's what stops people going into extremes, that feeling of how you must be making someone else feel or suffer. When you don't have that, no ability to feel emotional consequences for whatever you do, you can do whatever you like. Pepper bombing cities of civilians, not a problem. No remorse is another one, which comes from no empathy. No shame. Psychopaths are parasites. They feed off the labor of other people. The banking system, I rest my case. They're pathological liars. They say what is necessary to get what they want. And they do whatever it takes to get what they want. And what I've just described in the traits of a psychopath and the traits of these bloodlines, which is why they do what they do. And they, in this last 30 years that I've been researching this around the world, over and over, you track these people and you go deeper and deeper in, and you will eventually hit Satanism and you'll hit pedophilia, which are massively connected. And I've talked to people who've taken part in these rituals all over the world. I mean the big ones, because Satanism is massively compartmentalized. They talk about the fact that these major rituals, they are interacting with this non-human force. These are the satanic gods, if you like. And there was this guy called Steve Taylor. He was an academic in Britain, a place called Leeds University. And he wrote a book a few years ago now called The Fall. And the reason he did it is because he saw a point about 6,000 years ago when the human psyche suddenly changed. And it became very different in a ridiculously short period, considering the perceptions of evolution. And he says in this book that until 6,000 years ago, 4000 BC, there was no war as we know it, no patriarchal society as we know it, no massive inequality as we know it, no class system as we know it, no gods or organized religion as we know it. And this change followed violent invasions of Indo-European and Semitic peoples into the Middle East. And you know, there's so much information that's taken for granted if it's real. If I say Semitic, people will say, you mean Jewish? No, that's not Semitic. The Semitic refers to a language group in the Middle East. And the overwhelming vast, except a tiny, tiny number of that language group are Arabic languages. So anti-Semitism is actually a complete misnomer. And this cultural historian, Rian Eisler, said of this point which Taylor was identifying, the great change, he called it, a change so great indeed that nothing in all we know of human cultural evolution is comparable in magnitude. And basically what is being described is a point came when people moved much more into the five-sense level of perception, the five-sense level of perceiving the world, and came out of a much wider interaction with reality after this, quote, fall. And what the effect it had, as you come more and more focused on five-sense reality alone, is it was trapping human perception and attention in the five senses, and shutting out an influence of the wider consciousness that people had before. And I would say, because it wasn't just these bloodlines that were seeded by these gods, human genetics in general was manipulated, all described in the ancient societies around the world. And I say, the fact that we can see such a tiny fraction of visual reality is not by evolution, it's by design. So these bloodlines were seeded all over the world, but you can pick up one great flow of them that are very, very relevant to today, which came out of Sumer, which became Babylon, out of ancient Egypt, came up through the Caucasus, and across through what we call Turkey into Northern Europe. They were behind the creation of the Roman Empire, and then they moved up and became the bloodlines and the aristocratic and royal bloodlines of Europe, which of course became the great empires of Europe. And through colonization, what Steve Taylor, this academic, calls the new psyche that appeared, this new psyche was exported all over the world. And what happened? When that new psyche entered different countries, they targeted the old psyche and marginalized it, took control of it, and in many ways changed it, although not completely. And they took the world over, this new psyche. And as we've moved on from that, power has been more and more centralized. So fewer and fewer people with this extreme new psyche have been taking more and more control of human society. Which brings us to this. This is how the world is controlled, this is how countries are controlled. Because the way the world is controlled is holographic. And the great thing about holograms is every part of a hologram is a smaller version of the whole. This is how this global web works. So, I've been talking for all these years about the permanent government, the government that's always there. And now, of course, it's common parlance to talk about the deep state. Actually, the deep state is not the permanent government, it's part of the permanent government. But it's the same theme. So, you've got this permanent government. Outside of human reality, you've got this psychopathic consciousness, which is what this non-human force is, manifesting through these bloodlines. Then you have these non-human entities I'm talking about. And then you hit the world of the sea. And that's where you have the permanent government, controlled by these hybrid bloodlines, which manipulate through the secret societies, which own finance and banking, and thus dictate choice and freedom, that own the military and the intelligence networks. The intelligence agencies are secret societies, that's what they are. They own the major corporations, they own government administration, they own the law in the courts, and they own the major media. And everything I've just described in that list is always there. It's not affected by who comes and goes in the here today, gone tomorrow politics and politicians. It's always there. It's the permanent government. The trick is this, and my God, they've achieved it more obviously than ever now, is to get the public to focus on that which is not permanent. The here today, gone tomorrow, politicians and parties, as if that's where change takes place, as if that's where the power is. And so people are so focused here, fighting each other and cussing each other, and they then run the place, the permanent government, unchallenged. And the permanent government owns the here today, gone tomorrow, gophers and stooges. They're not the real power. Who runs the world? Not the people we see. And so when you look, people look at the world and they go, what the hell is going on? What's it all about? Why do they do this? Why don't they do it like that? Because people look at what would be best for humanity, but that which is controlling and dictating events is not dictating things to the benefit of humanity, but the opposite. So then we come to number 3, which is pseudo-randomness. If you're going to hide a pattern, and you're going to hide something that is all connected, you need to make people think that there's not a pattern. Everything is random. That happens, that happens, that happens, that happens, that happens, all random. When actually, they're all connected. So, when you look at these politicians, you get the feeling, or we're told to believe, that they are randomly appearing and running for office, but they're not. You know, to run for office, to be president now, you need cuckoo lands amounts of money. Who provides that money? Those that dictate what the person does in office. And a lot of these people won't even know the level of stooge that they are. Because the whole idea of politics is to give the illusion of choice. We're back to the illusion of freedom, while actually controlling it all. Because if you want to control the outcome to the point where you know the outcome before the game starts, it's no good influencing the game by controlling one side. You have to control both sides and the referee, and then you know the outcome before the game starts. And so this is what they do. And a lot of people in politics don't even know they're manipulated. But say someone genuine came along, which the web genuinely didn't like. The web owns the financial system. It owns the media. So therefore, it can put a spanner in the works of what you're trying to do. So a lot of people think Trump is here to change everything. He's not. The president runs America, but who runs him? Drain the swamp. What, drain the swamp? Swamp drainers do not put these people in government. They don't. The same swamp swimmers that we've seen before keep turning up. But if you want to see this permanent government in action, the American example is perfect. The Republican Party is basically controlled by a group, well known now, called the neocons or the neoconservatives. The Democratic Party is controlled by a similar group, which I call the democons. They control the Democratic Party. But if you go one step back into the shadows, the next step back, the neocons and the democons answer to the same master. And therefore, whoever's in power here, that is always in power, because that is the permanent government. So who shall I vote for? Well, you can vote for different rhetoric. You can even vote for different proposed policies. But look at history. The same agenda unfolds no matter who's in power. And we've reached the point now where people have become so mesmerized on the here today, gone tomorrow level, and at the expense of that, that whether you love Trump or hate Trump has become known as political debate. And they are pissing themselves, because this is exactly what they set out to do, to divide and rule America by setting it at war with itself over irrelevance. They run the world, who runs them? They run the EU, who runs them? And of course, politicians give, at least in theory, official permission to go to war. So through politicians and control of politicians, this hidden hand controls war. And how many people do you ever meet in your life who want a war? Not many, I don't. But we have them all the time. And this web is driving this war industry for a very simple reason. Nothing changes society more permanently and irreversibly than a war. That's why we keep having them. Because it's pushing this agenda for transformation of human society down the road by constantly destroying status quos and replacing them with others. So, you could call it creative destruction. You have a war, you destroy a society's status quo. You change the status quo. You have another war, you destroy that status quo, and you change the status quo. And every time you do it, you're going further and further along this agenda of heading towards the Hunger Games society and total control. This is why there's always money for war, but not for homeless people. Homeless people, no money. War, how much do you want? When's the last time a politician or a country said we can't go to war, we can't afford it? Never. Because it's driving the transformation to this society they're pushing us towards. And of course, I'm going to go through this very quickly because most people here will be aware of this. But this is a classic example of how the here today, gone tomorrow is manipulated by the permanent. The Project for the New American Century organization started in the 1990s by Robert Kagan, William Crystal. In its number were the 9/11 Deputy President Cheney, the 9/11 Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, his deputy Wolfowitz, Dov Zakheim, who controlled the budget of the Pentagon at 9/11, and John Bolton, who, of course, is still very much with us, was in there as well. And they produced a document in September 2000 which called for a series of countries to be regime changed in the Middle East and elsewhere. A few months, actually not much more than weeks, after they produced that document, these people came into power, most of them came into power with the Bush administration in January 2001. And this is what they said in September 2000. They wanted American forces to fight and decisively win multiple simultaneous major theater wars to regime change a series of countries, including Iraq, Libya, Syria, Lebanon, Iran, North Korea, and China. And it said in that document, September 2000, that this process of transformation, these regime changes and the massive increase in military spending to achieve them, is likely to be a long process, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. 1 year to the month after they published this document, 9 months after a large number of its authors came to power with Bush, America had what Bush called at the time the Pearl Harbor of the 21st century, 9/11. None of those things is by random chance. This was the trigger that started the process that's still going on of bringing about what that document demanded in September 2000. And we shouldn't forget that those who told us the official story of 9/11, which is a joke to anyone with half a brain cell, they're the same people who told us there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Same people, when they knew they weren't. Why did they tell us there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? Because Iraq was on that list for regime change. They hadn't got an excuse, so they invented one. And we had Wesley Clark, another war criminal, actually in the Balkans himself, but he has said publicly years ago that he had a general friend in the Pentagon who told him very soon after 9/11 they were going to invade Iraq. No one's talking about Iraq. Going to invade Iraq. He comes back a few weeks later, the same general told him they were going to invade a series of countries, not just Iraq. And what were those countries? The very countries named by the Project of the New American Century, for the New American Century in September 2000. He said, the Project for the New American Century, wanted us to destabilize the Middle East, turn it upside down, make it under our control. And what they've had to do is keep inventing different excuses to pick off different countries so that people don't see the pattern, although the pattern's blatantly bloody obvious. Now, let's go back here and see how this permanent government dictates to here today, gone tomorrow politicians quite clearly. These people will have come into office with different promises, different things they said they would do and wouldn't do. But there are so many parallels. First of all, Republican Bush and Labour Party Blair lied after 9/11 to justify the invasion of Iraq. They then disappear and their opponents come in. Democrat Obama and Conservative Party David Cameron. They oversee the next two on the list. The catastrophe invasion of Libya, because that's what it was, and the manipulated civil war in Syria. And then along comes Drain the Swamp Trump, and he is targeting Iran, another one big time on the list in September 2000. And the list keeps going on. North Korea was on it, Iran was on it, China was on it. And this is what I posted on the internet after Trump was elected. Key word of the Trump administration, Iran. Oh yes, China, both of which mean Russia. Because these are here today, gone tomorrow people. Never mind that. Never mind the Twitter, I'm in charge. History says it's not true. And who is now driving this, this war they want against Iran? John Bolton, the psychopath, Project for the New American Century. And now, let's go and get Venezuela, shall we?
Right. Yeah.
And let's put in one of the architects, Elliot Abrahams, to oversee it, one of the architects of the invasion of Iraq. This permanent government that's driving through America and through Britain and other countries, through here today, gone tomorrow politicians, they are the bullies of the world. They are the real grotesque terrorists of the world beyond anything that anyone else has possibly done. And of course Israel in there as well, because these are countries they want targeting. And just again to show you how this web works and how things aren't as they seem, the inner core of Zionism, which is not a race by the way, it's a political philosophy, is a secret society. Most people that support Zionism don't know that. At its core it's a secret society, and it attaches to this web, and so does the Knights Templar that was created in the 12th century. And of course Zionism, the inner core ultra-Zionism, wants to replace the mosque in Jerusalem with a rebuilt Solomon's Temple. The process of moving the US Embassy there, ethnic cleansing in East Jerusalem, is all moving towards that. But that's also been the goal of the Knights Templar all these centuries, because it's a web goal. Zionism is just part of the web, the inner core of Zionism. It's not in and of itself. So, how this is all achieved is through a mind game. There's so many people, 7.5 plus billion, being manipulated, so few people by comparison doing the manipulating, it has to be done through a psychological manipulation to get the population to see the world and events the way that suits the agenda. And here's one of the great constantly used techniques of mass mind manipulation. I called it back in the 80s, 90s rather, problem reaction solution, or PRS. Covertly create a problem, get the media to give the public the cause of the source of the problem you want them to believe. You want at stage 2 a reaction from the public of fear, of anxiety, of do something, and then you who've covertly created a problem and blame someone else, then offer the solution to the problem you've created. And the solution just happens to be changes in society that drive us towards this Orwellian global state. And there's another version of it, which I call no problem reaction solution, where you don't need a real problem, you need, here we go again, the perception of a problem which has the same effect. Weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, perfect example of no problem reaction solution to justify an invasion. Alongside PRS is the totalitarian tiptoe, as I call it. And this again we see all the time. You know you're going to Z, but you're at A. And you know if you go in giant leaps towards Z, then the change will be such that people might look up from the game show and the score and say, what's going on, what's going on, Ethel, what's going on? So you go as fast as you can, but not so fast that you alert too many people to the pattern, although people are now waking up to this more and more. And so if you put the two together, problem reaction solution and the totalitarian tiptoe, it comes together as this. This is really something, if people remember it, it's a real gateway opener to the agenda, day after day. Know the outcome, and you'll see the journey. The idea is to keep the planned outcome outside of public attention. As long as you do that, then things that happen are perceived as random events. But if you know where it's meant to lead, then suddenly random events become very clearly steps along the road towards that. We're going to see lots of examples of that in many different subject areas as we go along. So know the outcome and you'll see the journey. This is why uncovering the planned outcome is so vital. So, if you know that the outcome that they want from their own writings and their own documents, etc., is that if they can control this vast landmass known as Eurasia, they say if you control that, you control the world. Now suddenly, from that, know the outcome, you see the journey on why these countries are being picked off and targeted and demonized in this landmass of Eurasia. It's on that road to controlling the whole of it. And the eye of Soros. Soros is extraordinary, he's everywhere, or his networks are everywhere. Now, if you just keep invading countries that you want to target by sending the boys in, then the pattern becomes clear. Hey, Ethel, we've invaded someone else. So you don't. You manipulate the population in the target country to overthrow the regime you want overthrown. And this is why and where George Soros comes in with his network of what are called open society foundations. They specialize in starting agitation systematically in countries, which is then built up and ratcheted up until they say there's a revolution going on and this regime is killing its own people, and that's the justification to send the boys in. This is exactly what they're playing in Venezuela now. And so the Arab Spring, which turned out brilliant for the Arabs, didn't it? I mean, that was a real great thing for Arabs. Was all part of this, as are colour revolutions, where, like the Orange Revolution in Ukraine, the Rose Revolution in Georgia, they give them simple names. Keep your propaganda simple. And these revolutions are systematically manipulated to regime change without invasion. And this is a story about Soros. And what it says is, good job I've got good memory in it. What it says is that last year, he gave another $18 billion to his Open Society Foundations. And that title, Open Society, is going to become very relevant. It brought the total that he has contributed to the Open Society Foundations to $32 billion. That's the scale of money that is being used to manipulate countries. Now, again, I'll tell you what this is. This is a... Yeah, okay.
Oh, that's not
swap it over. I don't know, it's working perfectly before. This is a story about a British academic called Frank Furedi. And he was invited to one of his Open Society Foundation events in Budapest, which is where Soros was born. And he told a national newspaper in Britain how he's sitting around at lunch with these executives of the Open Society Foundations. And there he is. And they are bragging at the countries they have regime changed and manipulated and undermined, including playing a major part in creating the agitation that eventually got rid of Gaddafi in Libya. This is what Soros is doing. US government admits funding political change at the direction... Cheers, Jay. Cheers. Not so difficult, really, was it really? It's just gone off, man. There you go. Let's go back here. US government admits funding political change at the direction of billionaire George Soros. Soros ran US foreign policy in post-coup Ukraine. Now this becomes very relevant because, you know, there is this myth which is constantly perpetuated that Soros is on one side of politics and these right-wing neocons are on the other. No. That's just to keep the illusion going. What happens is Soros's Open Society Foundations manipulate the unrest, and then at a certain point the neocons send the boys in to finish it off. It's a whole scam. So he was involved in the agitation that led to the revolution in Ukraine, and the lady who oversaw it for the American State Department was the Assistant Secretary of State for Eurasian Affairs, Victoria Nuland, the wife of Robert Kagan, co-founder of the Project for the New American Century. We're talking of very, very few people that are running the United States. And so we have Soros, godfather of the left, they call him, and we have people like Sheldon Adelson, godfather of the right, biggest funder of the Republicans, and Trump. And together, what are they doing? They are controlling the game by controlling both sides. And this is where they wanted to lead World War III. That's why they've got this demonization of Russia. Burnt the toast, it's the Russians. Got a cold, it's the Russians. Got a flat, it's the Russians. Everything's the bloody Russians. And that's why having this massive build-up of troops along the border with Russia, NATO troops, because they want a confrontation. US makes biggest arms shipment to Europe since the Yugoslav war, and so it goes on. Russia is getting ready for war in case the US attacks. Why wouldn't it? Obviously they can see where it's going. And same with Russia, with China, and they're getting closer and closer to Russia because they can see the way the pieces are being moved about. So, number 4, control perception by centralizing power. Know the outcome and you'll see the journey. The outcome they want is the centralization of global power with a world government, world central bank, world army, world currency, and everything on a world centralized level. So once you know that's the outcome, then you can see the journey. This is what globalization is and why. When there's a few of you and you want to control the many, you have to centralize decision making. There's no way you can do it otherwise. You have to constantly centralize power, because every time you centralize it, you, the few, are controlling the lives of more and more people. You centralize even more, and so it goes on, and they want to do it on a world level. So globalization is simply this agenda unfolding. It's the word that we gave to it. The web is driving this centralization of power. And what is that doing? It's driving the power and the wealth up the Hunger Games pyramid into that 1% at the expense of everyone else. All cold, calculated and systematic. North Atlantic Terrorist Organization, NATO, is the world army that's unfolding before our eyes. Back in the 1990s, I said, watch NATO operating outside the North Atlantic because it's meant to be the world army. Look at where it's operating now. I said in the 1990s, they want a European army as part of this world army. And now we have Macron in France and Merkel in Germany saying, we've just had an idea. What about a European army? And you're like, oh my God, it's the plan all along. And if you look at the vast amount of money that American taxpayers give to the military, something like more spent on the US military than the next 8, 9 countries combined, including Russia and China. It's not the American military. The point, it's the world army in the process of being created. This is why the American military has carved up the world into a structure of commands. This structure is meant to be handed over to the world army eventually, when that comes into being, if we allow it. And what this military police state that we see unfold, whether it's militarily or in the moment in police, they want the two to be the same thing eventually, is they're building this structure of control in the Hunger Games pyramid to protect that 1% from everyone else and to make sure that structure doesn't change. And if you look at these intelligence agencies and these various militaries, and this is the thing to remember about this web, the vast majority of people in these organizations are not aware of what is actually happening. But if you go deep enough into these organizations, there comes a point where they attach to the web. And at that point, all these organizations are operating to the same agenda. This is a world exclusive. ISIS headquarters. This is how this manipulation works. If you want to justify problem, reaction, solution going into a country, you need to manufacture an excuse if you haven't got one. Weapons of mass destruction in Iraq was one, and the creation of ISIS and Al-Qaeda was another. And this is how this works, and how you've got terrorist organizations, the rank and file, controlled by the very people they think they're fighting. At the top of the structure, you've got the hidden hand who work down through the secret societies, that work down through the upper levels of military intelligence. And these military intelligence upper levels control the terror group leaders and fund them and train them. And the rank and file think they're actually fighting some holy war when they're actually doing the bidding of the very people they think they are they are fighting. So we see this in terms of terrorism on the news. What we don't see is this. And when you see that, the picture looks very different. So know the outcome and you'll see the journey. The outcome they want is this police military state. So now you're seeing the journey, where the police are becoming more and more totalitarian, looking more and more like the military. Metropolitan Police in London pushing ahead with armed patrols despite backlash justified by fighting terrorism, problem, reaction, solution. The American police force is going around in tanks, it's insane. Police department with 2 full-time officers has over 900 pieces of military equipment. This is the move towards this police military state that they eventually want. And this great surveillance society is all part of this police state in that pivotal place in the middle of the pyramid. Welcome to the Minority Report. Thousands of stores plan facial recognition used for anti-theft. It's not for anti-theft. The shop may think it is at that level, but it's really about constant surveillance. And these internet giants that are now the prime surveillance vehicles of humanity are actually, I'll get more into this as we go along, they're actually just fronts for the Pentagon and the intelligence agencies. If they didn't exist, these giants, then the intelligence agencies and the military would have had to have invented them. I say they did. Here's an interesting coincidence. On February the 4th, 2004, the Pentagon killed a project to amass personal browsing and viewing habits of American citizens. On the same date, Facebook launched. Now, of course, they don't even have to keep surveillance on us. People keep posting our personal details on these platforms. So what's unfolding in all these different forms is this central structure within the Hunger Games pyramid, and they want to get it in place as fast as possible because they know something I've been talking about now for decades, and it's happening, clearly. There comes a point where you can no longer operate under the radar, because if you want to transform human society into the way that you want it to be, at some point you have to break the surface, and that society has to start changing in the way that you want it, and then people see it. And this is what's happening now. People are going, hold on a minute, what's all this about? I don't like this. And they know that as this unfolds more and more people will go, hold on a minute, what's happening? We're starting to see it. They want this surveillance state in place, this control system in place, before that reaches critical mass, to try to head it off. So, number 5, control perception, dictate choice. I'll keep this really brief because most people here will know all about this, but it's basically the web controlling money. And so choice, as I say. And if you look at these organizations, whether they are, your so-called regular banks, or the World Bank, or Wall Street, or the International Monetary Fund, whatever, again, they're compartmentalized pyramids, but there's a point in them where they attach to the web. And at that point, all these organizations are working as one unit to the same end. So bankers control finance, but who controls them? The web does. And through the money hoax of lending people money that doesn't exist and charging interest on it, which is basically organized crime. Working for 50 years to repay debt created out of nothing on the computer screens of organized crime, and they call it living. This is one of the great ways that this web imposes its will upon humanity. Half the world's wealth in the pockets of just 8 men. What are we looking at? We're looking at that Hunger Games pyramid I talked about. The poorest 50% of the world own the same as those guys. Cashless society. They want cash out of the way so that only electronic means is available. And I know there are other people who have been at this conference earlier who are working on ways to overcome that themselves in this digital way, but the basic foundation of the agenda is to take cash out of circulation so that only digital cash, which is controllable and can be kept under surveillance, is available. And also to so control money without cash that they can dictate who can spend and who can't by who the computer system allows to purchase and who doesn't. And you look at all these major corporations, whether it's arms, whether it's oil, whether it's internet or whatever, Amazon, you go deep enough into them and they attach to this same web and they're operating as one unit at that level. So Jeff Bezos owns these and so much more, but who owns Bezos? Well, let's have an idea who owns Bezos. He's got a massive $600 million contract with the CIA for cloud services. Another one is something like $10 billion coming up with the military, the Pentagon. These are military operations, military intelligence operations, Amazon and Facebook and Google. It's what they're there for. And another thing about the web, which explains a lot of things, is that the web controls the corporations, owns them, but it also controls the agencies of government that's supposed to protect the public from the corporations. And that's why the corporations get what they like, and other small businesses and what have you who are not part of the web get regulated into destruction. Big Pharma and regulatory agencies are on the same side, which is why Big Pharma gets whatever it bloody likes, basically, and alternative forms of healing are targeted by the very agencies that protect Big Pharma. And then another way that this 1% has become the 1% is through outsourcing. Outsourcing by having production done by the poorest people in the world and then moving that production into the rich world for maximum profit. And now they are planning to do it, they are doing it in Europe and other areas by importing the cheap labor and saying how their heart bleeds for migrants. Well, let's just put this to bed for a start. The same web and the same representatives of the web that have been blowing the shite out of people with brown faces decade after decade are not going to convince me that suddenly their heart bleeds for them.
Yep.
So therefore, there's another reason. And here's a bit of background. In 1969, no one knows why this guy did this, but he did. I'm glad he did. In 1969, a guy stood up called Dr. Richard Day in front of a meeting of pediatricians in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Richard Day was a big Rockefeller family insider. He was an executive of Planned Parenthood and a doctor. And he stood up to speak and he said to these pediatricians, can you turn off recording equipment and not take notes, because I'm going to tell you how the world's going to change. And one doctor called Dr. Lawrence Dunnigan did take notes and later did a series of interviews to describe what Day said that night in 1969. And the reason he did the interviews is because he realized that what Day said that night was happening, and not just in theme but in detail. And in my last book, the last book before this one called Phantom Self, I quote what Day said that night at some length. It is extraordinary how what he said was going to happen and the network that he represented was going to make it happen, and it's happening. And this is what Richard Day said in 1969. There will be mass movements of migrations of people without roots in their new locations, because traditions are easier to change in a place where there are a lot of transplanted people as compared to trying to change traditions in a place where people grew up and had an extended family where they had roots. And this is a UN report from 2000 admitting that refugees are being used. They're not refugees. Refugees, my hands straight up. We've got to help them when they're fleeing war and fleeing persecution. But That's not what this is all about. Only in a relatively small number of cases compared with the numbers. It's a much different story. Replacement migration. Now, to understand what this is all about is to understand another goal of this global society. And it is to absorb all cultures and differences of culture into one global blob of non-diversity. And therefore, people say now it's racist that you're saying there shouldn't be this migration on this scale or this migration on that scale. But actually, this is just stage bloody one. Where it's meant to lead is a complete fusion of global cultures with all that, glorious diversity to one blob world culture controlled by a world government. And so this might give you an idea of where we're going with this. There's an estimated currently up to 22 million people in America without documentation. Someone whose heart bleeds for these people has said they must not be made to leave, they must be allowed to stay. And that man is a guy who's just created a new organization to campaign for this. Bill Crystal, co-founder of the Project for the New American Century. And so this whole mass migration is all part of the same agenda of the Project for the New American Century. And another part of it is to create divide and rule between the indigenous populations and the migrant populations. It's happening in Europe big time. And that's exactly what they plan. Oh, falling over. And this, that's not bad for 66, was it? This is what, I know everyone was shocked at that, 66. 35, I'd say 35, wouldn't you? Just look at them. It's exactly what they want. And now, here is a big red flag to understanding what is the agenda and what isn't. How do you know if it's the agenda? They ban or abuse you for discussing the subject or having a contrary opinion. Absolutely, that's the agenda every time. And this is why. If having a debate on certain subjects means you couldn't possibly win them on the evidence and the facts and the consequences, then you simply don't have the debate. And you stop that debate by hurling abuse, racist, Nazi, bigot, sexist, whatever, at the people who want to debate, and you shut it down. So, questions like, where are they going to live? Where are they going to work? What about all the other jobless and homeless people already in these countries? What about the fact that typhus is breaking out among homeless communities in Los Angeles? What about that? Oh no, more and more and more. And you know what it is? It's a few people abusing a country and abusing the people they are manipulating to come in vast numbers into that country. The same hands are holding the strings of both. And we need to wake up to it. And it's this shut down the debate so that it's not possible. For a long time happened in Sweden. Although Sweden was being transformed in a very short time, you couldn't have a debate or you were a bigot or a racist. And this is another reason that it's happening, because there's multi-reasons for everything. I said earlier that in this structure of the world state, they want to replace nation states with just regions with no power. Replace nation states so there are no countries. Well, you'll have noticed that this fake liberal left that's hijacked the genuine liberal left that I was brought up in, and I still support, the fake liberal left, now called progressive, the extremes of it, more and more, on top, want open borders. They're talking about it in different parts of the world, particularly this thing over the wall. Open borders. If you have open borders, there is no geographical location for your society. Thus your society cannot ultimately survive in the form that it's in. And if you therefore open borders and drop borders, what does that mean? The end of countries. And that is what this is about, this open border stuff. All these people with their platitudinal placards, open borders, look, heart on my sleeve, I'm such a nice person. All that is fronting up without the knowledge for the very people that want to end countries. And hello, I'm bloody back. The Open Society Foundation networks are absolutely at the heart of manipulating this mass migration beyond what would normally happen. You know, immigration and stuff, and migration is a good thing. Scale we're talking about, and the reasons for that scale. Leaked documents prove Soros's Open Society is working with UN in supporting current illegal migrant crisis. Exactly. These caravans from the south, parent company, spokeswoman connected to Soros. And so, this whole shut the debate down by hurling abuse is being funded, or the organizations behind it are being funded by this guy Soros, who is one arm of the neocons claiming to be the opposite. So here we've got George Soros, now called, staggeringly, the godfather of the left because of all the money he pumps into these progressive organizations. And this is what he said: I am basically there to make money. I cannot and do not look at the social consequences of what I do. Why would someone with that mentality want to spend tens of billions on progressive groups? Because control both sides and you control the game. And the right and the progressive left need to get their asses in gear, rub their eyes and realize they're both being taken by these people. So we now have the self-gesture politics, the Soros-funded progressive mentality, while people sleep in the streets and typhus breaks out in Los Angeles. Progressive Marxism is what they're funding. Marxism, Karl Marx, was the banker's man. If you want to centrally control something, you elite, then you can do it the capitalist way and you can gather all the wealth together and do it through power of wealth, or you can create a political system where the very structure of society is centralized and you can control that center and you control that society as well. Marxism. And what was Marxism about? Is Marxism about? The class struggle. Transforming societies through conflict. And what they've done now with this Soros-funded progressive movement, this fake liberal left that's taken over from the genuine liberal left, they have turned identity, self-identity, identity politics into the struggle that transforms society through conflict. And this is what the left is having done to it by the bankers and the billionaires it claims to oppose. Martin Luther King: nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. And unfortunately, the universities and the colleges have been largely taken over by this mentality. Now, number 6, and these next 3 will be seen to have some connection. Number 6, hide the real goal. Where has this all been leading? Step by step, totalitarian tip-top, they have been leading us on a technological journey to replace the human mind with artificial intelligence, and it's happening before our eyes today. Can we drop that? Has that gone off? The idea is to assimilate human consciousness into AI so it becomes the human mind and it becomes human perception. And it's being done through the devil's playground. And I say through the devil's playground because that's not where it starts out. That's not who's driving it. This is the real Silicon Valley. You imagine if you are the military intelligence complex that want that Hunger Games society, you want three things. You want lots of things, but you particularly want three things. A, you want constant surveillance of the population. Tick, 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 tick.
And they do it themselves.
Two, you want to control what people see and don't see in terms of information. Tick, 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 and you want to censor that. You don't want people to see. Tick, 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 tick. And thirdly, which is where it's been leading, you want to connect the human brain, mind, body to artificial intelligence. And people who haven't followed this won't realize that Google and Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook are at the cutting edge of AI technology and all that goes with it. And behind the AI agenda and the technological agenda in its negative form is this Pentagon agency called DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which has given the world wonderful things like death rays and genetic extinction technologies that target specific genetic types. They're lovely people, and they are driving this agenda. And if you, again, go into these organizations in all their forms deep enough, they attach to the web, and they're all working to one end at that level. So these puppet billionaires, who we're told run these companies, no they don't. They're just frontmen, very rich frontmen. The real power is elsewhere. Larry Page and Sergey Brin own Google, but who owns them? Mark Zuckerberg runs Facebook. Who runs him? I mean, Mark Zuckerberg runs Facebook. Oh dear. What? Have you seen him? Ask him a question. His lights are in the head. You know, his eyes are in the headlights of an oncoming car. You ask me my name? Unbelievable. Of course he doesn't run Facebook. This complex of organizations controls Silicon Valley through organizations like the CIA's InQtel or IQT, which seed funds technologies like Silicon Valley technologies and companies that would be useful to their goals and agenda. And even some of the people working for these companies have now started to suss it. Microsoft and Amazon workers protest firms' military AI contract and authoritarian surveillance tech. Microsoft vows to hand over all its technologies to ethical and honorable US military. I bloody love it. And another question, why would DARPA be funding technologies like office assistants and personal assistants? I mean, you know, did they have a few on lunchtime and think, well, let's ditch the death rays this afternoon, let's see if we can invent something that's good for people? Of course not. There's a reason for this, and I'm going to come to it. And here's the personification of what I'm talking about. Regina Duggan. She started out as director of DARPA, the technological development arm of the Pentagon. She then had an incredible career move and became an executive of Google, and then moved again and became an executive of Facebook. And basically her brief at all these places was to develop technologies that fluidly blend physical and digital worlds. The agenda I'm talking about of assimilation into AI. And then we've got Google executive Ray Kurzweil, who is called a futurist. Seems to be very accurate in his predictions for future technology, but it's a bit like being a brilliant predictor of financial situations, isn't it? When you become a billionaire, and people say, "Ooh, he's ever so clever. He knows when things are going to happen." Well, how about if he represents people who are making them bloody happen, that are making things go up on the market, making them go down, and he knows about them, and he gets out of this and into that, makes some more money. You don't have to be too brilliant when you know what's planned. I put Kurzweil in technology terms in that category. This is what he said. Humans will have hybrid cloud-powered brains by 2030. We are speaking in 2019. And he goes on. Our thinking will be a hybrid of biological and non-biological thinking. Humans will be able to extend their limitations and think in the cloud. We're going to put gateways to the cloud in our brains. We're going to gradually merge and enhance ourselves. In my view, that's the nature of being human. We transcend our limitations. Why are they being so open in telling us this? I'll tell you. And he goes on, as the technology becomes vastly superior to what we are, then the small proportion that is still human gets smaller and smaller and smaller until it's just utterly negligible, at which point the human brain, the human mind, is artificial intelligence. And this is the sales pitch. This is why they're being so open about it. With robots in our brains, we'll be superhuman. No, we won't. We'll be subhuman, and they bloody know it. And so this is the game. Control of perception is vital for mass control of people. Up to this point, perception has been manipulated by control of information. This endgame is to replace even the need for that by having AI deliver our perceptions in a full package, no manipulation necessary. That's what they are talking about. Elon Two Mouths. AI could be the end of humanity. You're right, Elon. But we must merge with it to save ourselves. Oh, I don't get that bit, mate. Elon Musk wants to merge brains and computers with Matrix-style technology. What happened to the end of humanity, Elon? Could you explain that to me, darling? And we need to watch web people, not necessarily in Elon Musk's case, fully blown, full knowledge web people, but web control people, controlling both sides of a debate. Because Kissinger, of all people, has come out and said AI could be the end of humanity, basically, and he not only knows that's the idea, he supports it. It's controlling the debate. So, know the outcome, and you'll see the journey. We're going to put the real reason for the internet in perspective now. The outcome they want is the AI human assimilated into AI. So, we're told that the World Wide Web was invented in 1989. Richard Day described the internet to those pediatricians in 1969. Who claims that they created the internet?
Al Gore.
With military technology. DARPA. Now, DARPA doesn't create an internet for the benefit of humanity. It creates it for the benefit of the agenda it represents. And this has been the game. Number one, you create the internet and you advance the internet so it becomes the absolute foundation of human society. Basically, almost everything depends upon it, and it's irreversible. At the same time, if you're going to achieve that, you have to give people an internet that they're gonna bloody want. So what do we have for a long time? An internet with a free flow of information, no censorship, and people say this is great. And it developed and it developed and it developed and it became the central pillar of human society. At the same time, you seed fund companies that you want to build up into corporations that dominate that internet. Again, if you're going to do that, those companies have to give people what they want, and they did for a long time. The free flow of information and no censorship. But then there comes a point where, one, you've achieved the internet becoming the foundation of human society, and two, your companies have become near monopolies in the areas they work in. At that point, now, the veil can lift. And what the internet was always meant to be, and what these companies were always meant to be, can now be unveiled because they believe it's irreversible. And that is massive censorship of what can and cannot be communicated on the internet, which is getting louder all the time. We have domination of communication of information and therefore the ability to censor it. That's what it was meant to be all along. First of all, you then get this vast number of gadgets, everything from your fridge to your car, everything, television, connected to the Internet of Things, which is way, way advanced now. And it's funny, you know, because I've been on this road a long time, and I remember warning about the Internet of Things, and it's like 5 minutes ago, and look at it, already it's moving so fast. The next part of it is the Internet of Everything, and that is when the human mind is connected to the Internet and AI in the way I've described. And now, if you're going to create this control grid, what I've been calling for years the technological sub-reality, then you have to cover every area of the planet with Wi-Fi and communication access to the human mind. And therefore you have to fire it from space, and this is why something like 20,000 satellites are going up to pound the Earth with Wi-Fi coming up 5G. And the SpaceX company of the end of humanity, Elon Musk, is one of the major means that they're using to do it. This is why we have Wi-Fi everywhere. You cannot get away from it. This is why we have these electromagnetic Wi-Fi fields through smart meters, overlaying other fields in the home and business now. And what they call, what Kurzweil calls the cloud, is also called the smart grid. And so this is why all these gadgets are coming out with smart in front of it. All these smart gadgets are part of the same smart grid, the smart web of technological human control. So we're having smart cities being developed, which they call human settlement zones in their documents, some of them. And city of surveillance, Google-backed smart city sounds like a dystopian nightmare. This is a story of a Google-backed smart city, and someone who was working on it walked out and told the story because he realized what it was, a complete surveillance and control operation for the occupants. Saudi Arabia plans to build $500 billion high-tech mega city, 33 times bigger than New York's, just near the Jordan border. And now this Internet of Things has reached billions, tens of billions of things connected to the Internet. And to have the communication power to instigate this fully fledged smart grid cloud, they need 5G, 5th generation, which is very different to 4th generation of what's gone before, using millimeter waves with no testing at all. I watched a telling video clip 2 days ago on Capitol Hill, where this Senator Blumenthal was asking representatives of the telecommunications industry how much money they had spent on testing the dangers of 5G. And they said nil, not a cent. And it's been given permission because it has to come out for this grid to operate. And scientists and some politicians, only a few, are seeing the dangers of this and what it's really about. And these are the dangers. The human body is an expression of an electromagnetic information field. When that field is distorted, it distorts the body field, and we get ill health or psychological ill health. The brain communicates electrically. DNA is a receiver transmitter of information. It also works electrically. anything, any frequency that distorts and impacts upon that balance is going to have fundamental impacts on human health, physical and psychological. And that's what 5G is about, and they know it. And the 5G frequency at a higher power is what the military use to scatter protests, because when they fire the frequency at the crowd, the people get the feeling their skin is on fire, and they understandably run. This is what we're dealing with. The other thing about 5G is it doesn't travel far. So instead of big transmitters transmitting over a long distance, you have these little boxes pounding it out down every street, outside kids' bedrooms, etc. This is what 5G means. And they're also putting up these 20,000 satellites to fire 5G at the Earth. This is why I spent 30 years trying to get this across, because this is not sometime never over the rainbow. We're facing this now. And if we don't get our asses in gear, it's going to be past the point where we wish we had got our asses in gear. And the reason that they can get this through, this 5G, with no testing, is because the web owns them, and the web owns the government agencies like the FCC that's supposed to protect the public from those companies. So, number 7, very much connected. Control perception by creating addiction dependency. Watch the outcome and you'll see the journey. The outcome, they want the assimilation of humanity and AI. So, totalitarian tiptoe. Step 1, stage 1, get them addicted to technology they hold, especially the young. Why? Because the young today are going to be the adults when this is full-blown played out. So they need to get them now so they're less of a problem here. And so we have this. 1 in 3 kids use a mobile phone or tablet before they can talk. Call it digital heroin because it addicts the brain to digital stimulus. And this is why people keep picking the bloody thing up and they put it down and they have to pick it up because the brain becomes addicted to that stimulus, chemically and digitally. Giving your child a smartphone is like giving them a gram of cocaine, says top addiction expert, exactly as it's meant to be. Children as young as 13 attending smartphone rehab as concern grows over screen time. This has been systematically done. Get them addicted, addicted, addicted. And this is Aldous Huxley. You know, I've said this years ago. Aldous Huxley, when he wrote Brave New World in 1932, and George Orwell, who wrote 1984 in 1948, were not coming totally from their imagination. There are 2 worlds. There's the world that we are aware of, and that has a certain level of knowledge. Then there's the world that manipulates this world, which has a much greater projection of knowledge and a projection of the so-called future. And if you can uncover this world, you can see what's coming in this world long before even the technology exists here to achieve what is planned. So Aldous Huxley said, people will come to love their oppression, to adore the technologies that undo their capacities to think. Then, got them addicted to holdables. Now, wearables, you want to get inside the body. Now you're on the body. It's your Bluetooth, it's your Google Glass, it's your, all these gadgets that people wear. And then, you go to implantables, you get in the body. I spoke in Sweden a few months ago. 3,000 people have been microchipped in Sweden now. My books in the 90s, like And the Truth Shall Set You Free, says the agenda is the population is planned to be microchipped. It's happening. They're just introducing microchips now in Britain in the same way. Alarm over talks to implant UK employees with microchips. This is the totalitarian tiptoe. And this is what this is all about. It's very important. Before you can make a physical connection to AI, you have to make a psychological connection for people to reduce the resistance to the physical connection. So what we're having now is all these gadgets, not least for children more and more, where people are talking to AI as if it's frickin' human. because it's breaking down that difference, that perceptual difference for the fully fledged takeover of the human mind. Alexa hits the road, Amazon's voice assistant, to be integrated into cars. Amazon patents a new Alexa feature that knows when you're ill and offers you medicine. Ultra creepy Wi-Fi Barbie hides your children now connected to the internet. Kids talking to AI. Robots have power to brainwash children and alter their behavior. Exactly what he's done. And then there's this one. Sex bots are coming. Scientists say digisexual is inevitable as more people bond with robots. Well, I've got to put them in, haven't I? I've got to put them in. Wouldn't be fair. So, this is where we're heading. The assimilation of the human mind into AI, not just through microchips, rice-sized microchips you can see, but also through nanotechnology known as smart dust. And Google's Gerswile said that these nanobots, these smart dust, this nanotechnology microchip, nanobots will infuse all the matter around us with information. Rocks, trees, everything will become these intelligent creatures, which kind of explains why people who've researched this have concluded that this nanotechnology is coming down in chemtrails. How else would you bathe everything in the stuff like Kurzweil is talking about unless it was from the sky? And this is also connected to this technological sub-reality, to this vast increase in technological radiation in the atmosphere. From when I was a kid in the 50s, when there was virtually no technology at all, like there's none, to where we are now, the difference is fantastic. And it's being pounded out through many means that are not obvious transmitters of this stuff. This is a DARPA scientist, a former one, who's talking about cell towers across the USA, broadcasting brain resonance frequencies that disrupt human minds. Exactly what they're meant to do. Exposure to cell phone and wireless Wi-Fi radiation can reduce impulse control and cause violence. Very simple, written about this years ago. Everything is a frequency. Every thought, every perceptual state is a frequency. If you can work out what those frequencies are, and they have a long time ago, then if you can fire those frequencies like the frequency of rage at a community, the brain is just a processor of information. It will pick it up as long as it's in with its frequency band, and it will process it, and people will feel rage because they've been manipulated externally too. And kids are being bombarded with this stuff, and it's attacking the human energetic field with all the consequences that has. And this is a Canadian scientist who's specialized in this field. For the first time in our evolutionary history, we have generated an entire secondary virtual densely complex environment, an electromagnetic suit that essentially overlaps the human nervous system. This is what has been going on while people have been watching the game shows and the sport and arguing whether Trump is going to make America great again or whether he's the epitome of bloody evil. And the human goldfish comes from the increasing lack of concentration span because of this digital addiction to the brain. We're reading a book, oh no, where's my digital stimulus? Because they've thought for a long time, but when the brain was formed, that was it. Now they know different. The brain is constantly changing in how it processes information caused by the information it's processing. So if you change the information that the brain is subjected to, it will change the way it processes information. The neuron networks will change. Well, the human brain has been bombarded in this fraction of time by this new technology. And it's changing the way that people process information, especially the bloody young. And it's coming for jobs. No one's even looked at the consequences for that. 3.6 million cashiers, what are they going to do? And what they've done is they've been manipulating humanity to build its own technological prison presented as technological progress while not having the wisdom to realize that that's what's the intelligence. Okay, on one level it's algorithms and codes. On another level it's what they call learning AI, where they are pouring information at this stuff and it's learning from it. But what if, I say there is, another level of this AI, which is called AI, which can also access the human mind via these technological connections and absorb the human mind into itself? And what if that fake AI was actually the very alien consciousness that's been manipulating humanity all this time? Because this guy, of course, Kaku, a famous American celebrity physicist, said, fear robots, not aliens. And I put at the bottom, but what if the aliens are controlling the robots? What if this fake AI that we never talk about is actually the aliens? And what if that, through these technological connections, is planning to absorb the human consciousness into itself? I say it is. But whatever level you see AI, we are being invaded by it. So, number 8, genetic rewire. This is going to explain something that's become an unbelievable phenomenon in very recent years. Know the outcome and you'll see the journey. A little bit further along the road, but not as long as people think, they want to replace the biological human body with a synthetic version. And there is a manipulation technique known as preemptive programming. And this is how it works. You want to bring in a world that is so different to the one that people have known, that you know that the chasm between them is a big resistance factor. You want to do what? So what you do is, through movies and television programs galore, over a period of time, you keep portraying that world. Whether it's robots, whether it's synthetic humans, synthetic robots. And what you're doing is you're making the conscious and subconscious mind more and more familiar with that world you want to bring in for real, so as you do, the resistance is diluted because it's not such a shock anymore, because you have been prepared for it unknowingly. And that's what this big theme of biological people and robots is all about. 150 scientists just met in secret to discuss creating a synthetic human genome. A step closer to designer babies, scientists will create synthetic human DNA in just 5 years. Researchers develop an artificial nervous system that gives robots the ability to sense touch. This is how close biological and synthetic has become in terms of the way they look. And this is what's happening in China now. This is a Chinese newsreader, robot. Came into the news a few months ago. And the synthetic human is not meant to have the ability, quite understandably if you look at it, to procreate. There is planned to be no sexes. With no need to procreate, there's no need for different sexes in the synthetic human. And it was described by Aldous Huxley, Access to This World, in 1932. Natural reproduction has been done away with, and children are created, decanted and raised in hatcheries and conditioning centres. From birth, people are genetically designed to fit into one of 5 castes, which are further split into plus and minus members and designed to fulfill predetermined positions within the social and economic strata of the world state. World state. This is the maternity ward, and the not too distant tomorrow, unless we get ourselves together. And that is what this is really all about. Now, I think all discrimination is childlike, it's ridiculous, it's pathetic. But here's a technique. I call it foot in the door. You get the foot in the door. So at the start, you say, we mustn't be discriminatory against transgender people. Okay, push it against an open door with that one, no problem. Okay, fine. But then, whoosh, you open the floodgates. Whoa, what just happened? And it's no longer, it never was, about not being discriminatory against transgender people. It was about getting people, especially the young, confused about their gender who weren't confused before. That's what it's about. I travel the world, I see it everywhere. Stop calling them boys and girls. Advisors who are paid £200,000 to help train teachers say using sex-specific terms in the classroom is unfair to transgenders, even though there's probably no transgender in the bloody classroom. Yeah. Australian schools banned from using terms mum and dad, and boys told to dress up as girls in non-gender specific free play. Taxpayer-funded transgender lobby group demands free over-the-counter sex change hormones for children. Swapping gender norms in the name of equality. Icelandic school that makes boys paint their nails. Biological male wins world championship in women's cycling. Who's going to win the weightlifting? Who do you reckon? It's unbelievable. Women's sports being destroyed by this idea that you can have a big biological man claiming to be a woman taking part in women's sport. Ridiculous. About time someone said it. So how can this all be coordinated all over the world in a very short time, everywhere? This is how. And this is what the game is. The game is the no-gender human. The no-gender synthetic human. So you confuse gender, confuse, bewilder, confuse, fuse, no-gender human. And that process has started big time. And that's why we see in England a 4,415% rise in girls wanting to change sex last year. Because of this perceptual manipulation that's going on to push that. School has 17 children changing gender as teacher says vulnerable pupils are being tricked into believing they are the wrong sex. What did Richard Day tell those doctors in 1969? We are going to make boys and girls the same. At the same time, we're having gender-bending chemicals in things like plastic bottles, plummeting sperm counts and testosterone counts. We're having remarkable declines, as they call them, in fertility rates. Don't need fertility rates, no gender human. And this is what this is all about. All these dots connect. This attack on toxic masculinity. And look at that! University of Texas to treat masculinity as a mental health issue. I suggest we treat the Texas University as a mental health issue.
Yeah!
What is the Orwellian newspeak for toxic masculinity? Deleting backbone that says, we ain't having it, mate. We ain't standing for it. That's what it's about. Trans rights are human rights, yes they are. And so is the right to another opinion.
Yeah!
How do you know if it's the agenda? They ban or abuse you for discussing the subject or having a contrary opinion. We have reached the point where a professor of biology saying that men and women are biologically different, here's a mirror, I rest my case, loses his job for being discriminatory against transgender people. It is the road not long travelled, but long travelled past the point of insanity. Non-binary, unless we get our act together, they'll only be binary. On-off electrical charges of an AI human mind. And the World Army is designed to be AI. All these technologies now are coming out, controlled not by humans, but by AI. Pentagon unveils a story from today. Pentagon unveils 17-page strategy on artificial intelligence that says machines will impact every corner of the military as it ramps up efforts in AI arms race with Russia and China. US military will have more robot soldiers than human by the year 2025. Robocops coming to London. They're already on the streets of places like Dubai. Scientists worldwide fear worldwide controllable robot death squads. Exactly what's planned. Portrayed before us in the Matrix movies, symbolically and very close to literally. Which brings me to the foundation of all of the above. Control of information. Know the outcome and you'll see the journey. What is the outcome they want? A point where the only information anyone ever sees or hears is what the authorities want us to see and hear. That's the goal. And we are seeing it, the journey towards that, with this ever increasingly blatant censorship of anyone who is talking or having an opinion outside of that limitation. Few corporations own the media, but who owns them? Well, Silicon Valley again, owned by the Pentagon. They're putting more and more information that people receive onto the internet because they can then control it by AI algorithm, no human input necessary. The greatest concentration of surveillance and censorship power in known human history. And all of these media organizations, if you go deep enough into them, you'll find the point where they attach to this web and they work as one unit. The truth is this way, so they want us looking that way. And I saw this on Reddit. You go into what they call a community, which is posting information about challenging the official story of 9/11. And you go in, it says, are you sure you want to view this community? This community is quarantined. Great Orwellian phrase. It may contain a high degree of misinformation. If you are seeking historic information about the September 11th attacks, please visit the National Commission on Terrorist Attacks upon the United States. The biggest fairy story since Alice in Wonderland. And this is where we're going. And this is why freedom of speech is the new evil. As long as we have freedom of speech, that will never be possible. Because people have the freedom to speak and have opinions outside of that, you only see and hear what we decide you see and hear. So freedom of speech has to go for that to come in, and that's why it's being targeted. Zuckerberg, I'm optimistic AI bots will flag, censor hate speech before it is posted within 5 to 10 years. Actually,
they're doing it now.
They want it to be less than that.
They're doing it now.
Technology will exist to make it less than that. And this is a point. Silencing speech and opinion before the point of delivery. My view, people should be allowed to say whatever they bloody like. And who can have an arrogance so deep and all-encompassing that they can dictate what people can and cannot say? The point is, before the point of delivery, big important. There are laws after the point of delivery, where if you're inciting terrorism, there are laws against that. But it's after the point of delivery. As long as it's after, you are giving no authority the right and the power to dictate what people see and hear. Once you start censoring before the point of delivery, you are giving authority that power. And we see what happens. Stage 1, foot in the door. We must stop people inciting terrorism. Now, most people that don't know the game will say, yeah, I can live with that, but it don't stop there. We must stop hate speech. We must stop fake news. And so it goes on, more and more excuses to censor before the point of delivery. And we must hold that line. Soros again is funding these companies that are censoring and fact-checking censoring. Google and Soros-backed fact-checkers join forces to control new search results. Shadow banning, you post but it goes nowhere. And then there is political correctness, which is being driven by the fake progressive left, funded in its takeover of the genuine liberal left by money from people like Soros. Political correctness, you silence each other so we don't have to. And from political correctness comes the most insidious censorship, self-censorship. I will not even say it because I know the consequences of saying it. Thus I won't say it, and suddenly it's not even said anymore. And where are we? You only see and hear what they want us to see and hear. Political correctness is fascism pretending to be manners, George Carlin said. Absolutely. I'm offended so bloody what? Yeah! Okay, I'm offended, you're offended. Where do we go from there? Well, I'm offended that you're offended that I'm offended. Oh, Jesus. The creation of generation Jenny. Wow! Someone said something that disagrees with me. Wow! And we've now reached the next stage where the political correct mentality, which has been developed over years in the universities and the colleges, has now entered the world of politics and calls itself Ocasio-Cortez, who believes 2 and 2 equals 5. And that shouldn't be a problem because it's not what is right or factual, it's what feels right to their mentality. The rights of others are offensive, we demand you restrict them. What does the system do? Yes. Oh, yes. We'll stop those naughty people, because then you'll let me see it here. Oh, we want you to see it here. And it's newspeak, that's what political correctness is. The language in 1984. A controlled language as a tool to limit freedom of thought and concepts that pose a threat to the regime, such as freedom, self-expression, individuality, and peace. Progressives, the new tyranny. And you know, not much irritates me, but this bloody does. When I see the progressive mentality called liberal. All the liberal. They are not bloody liberal, if only. I wish they were. Here's the difference. Dictionary definition. Progressive. Favouring or advocating progress, change, improvement or reform, as opposed to wishing to maintain things as they are, especially in political matters. The Nazis got a claim to be progressive under that definition. Liberal, not political liberal, definition of liberal. Favourable to or in accord with concepts of maximum individual freedom possible, especially as guaranteed by law and secured by governmental protection of civil liberties. Favouring or permitting freedom of action, especially with respect to matters of personal belief or expression. Everything progressives want to shut down. That's the scale of the inversion. With students when I was a kid, went on marches demanding freedom of speech. Now we have this in Britain. King's College London deploys safe space marshals to ensure students don't have their feelings hurt at talks. And what does that do? What are we doing? What are we doing to young people? We are turning out, not totally, my God, there's a lot of fantastic young people who have seen through it, but the ones that are falling for it, what are they creating? Weak people. Yep. Weak people. What's the best thing? What's the best contribution we can make to children? To take away all challenge and all things they don't like and make them weak people, or make them so in their own power and in their own self-confidence they don't give a shit what anyone says about them. But why do they want to bring up young, weak people? Oh yes, sir, protect me, sir. Students demand comedian signs safe space contract ahead of charity event. In Britain, progressive PC warrior, here's another point of view. Oh, I know someone else who would agree with that. There you go. Banning opinions you don't like. Ooh, he'd love it. Nazis burn the books. All tyrannies, when they get power, want to destroy all alternative information, stop anyone hearing what they don't want them to hear. And now we have progressive, fake liberal people using the techniques of Nazi tyrannies and Stalinist tyrannies under the name of inclusivity. One day, I saw this on the internet, for no particular reason, we became offended by everything. What happened? No. It was not for no particular reason. It was for a very serious, very clear reason. Once being offended trumps freedom of speech, that's the end of freedom. Because you'll always find someone who will be offended by anything. And the more people you can persuade and pressure and encourage to be offended by more and more things, the more and more excuses you have to censor more and more opinions. That's the dynamic that is being done to achieve. We just had this in Europe. European ruling that religious feelings trump free speech is dangerous development. Sure, hell it is. And this is why we live in a post-fact society. Because if you can shut down debate because you can't win it, who cares about facts anymore? You don't need them. The mind game, connecting the free speech to the far right. Psychological mind game. You believe in freedom of speech? Oh, that's your far right. This is Hitler. We must look at the past to know the future. He said this: the best way to take control over a people and control them utterly is to take a little of their freedom at a time, to erode rights by 1,000 tiny and almost imperceptible reductions. In this way, the people will not see those rights and freedoms being removed until past the point at which those changes cannot be reversed. And so we have fascism calling itself anti-fascism, but then it always works best when it calls itself anti-fascism. Anti-hate group, opposing hatred. Have you seen these people? Yeah. I'm opposing hate! I hate hate, I do! God. Mirror, mirror! Yeah. And this is what it's about. Joseph Goebbels, Nazi Minister of Propaganda, accused the other side of that which you are guilty. Which is what we're seeing. So now, we have inclusion groups that exclude, anti-hate groups that hate, anti-racist groups that are racist, anti-sexist groups that are sexist, and diversity groups that destroy diversity. And this is where it leads us, and they are so in hysterics. And this progressive mentality that in its own self-deception believes it is the successor of the civil rights movement of the 60s. This man would weep at what is being done in his name and the name of civil rights. And of course it's about divide and rule, get the slaves fighting the slaves for the slave owners, which is what's happening. So you divide people, you divide and rule left and right, you divide people on race, on religion, on men and women being divided more and more on sexuality, young and old, and phone division. And here is the political correctness deprogramming unit, backbone. Not only am I not going to be affected by what anyone says about me, I don't care what anyone says about me. They have a right to say what they like. I have a right to say what I like. That is the deal. This is my Twitter storm response system. It tends to work. No words necessary. And the power of not giving a shit is unfreaking believable. What consumes your mind controls your life. And we have had another perception consume our mind and thus control our life. And if we want to be free, that has got to stop. And I'll be back in literally in 10 minutes to see what we can do about this, which is plenty. And you wouldn't expect me to come up with an approach that's kind of predictable. But after 30 years of studying this, my conclusion has been that the most important thing to change anything is to appreciate how we're created. Because you can find solutions to a problem, we're drowning in them. usually lead to other problems, or you can remove the cause of the problem. So it's a good start to grasp how the problem is caused, what's doing it, and then we can remove the cause. So, how do we escape the mind prison? Well, we can panic, oh, I want my mum! Or we can fight, oh yeah, let's fight, yeah, twice the fighting, we've moved on. We can talk endlessly. And we can do lunch and then talk more and come to no conclusion and do nothing. Or we can do the only thing that's going to change anything, and that's disconnect from the program that's driving this. Disconnect from being a clone of someone else's perception and version of reality and version of you. If this is the problem and how we got into this mess, this has to be the way out of it. A transformation of perception. But this is not just trite esoterics. There is a cause and effect, I would suggest, in the way that we interact with reality that makes this not just some esoteric concept, but actually a cause and effect. Because we are drawing out of this field of possibility and probability a reality which we call experience, collective and individual, which is dictated what we pull out of possibility and probability into an experience and what we don't by perception. And if you look at it in another way, the same is happening when we go on the internet. Our perceptions are dictating where we go on the internet, and thus what we plonk on the screen as a reality. And it's basically the same principle, obviously much deeper. So if we change our perception, we change the way we interact with possibility and probability, thus we change our experience collectively and individually. Our point of attention, what we call our consciousness, is a point of attention within an infinite state of awareness. But not every point of attention is infinitely aware. I rest my case. How much of this consciousness we interact with and thus are inspired and influenced by dictates what that point of attention perceives. So our point of attention becomes our point of perception, because what we focus upon becomes our reality. And our point of attention and point of perception becomes our point of self-identity. What we focus upon, the information we allow ourselves to interact with, dictates how we perceive our self-identity. So some people would say, I'm all that is, has been, and ever can be, and other people would say, I am Ma this, I am Ma that. So these are two different self-identities. Because for me, it's all down to self-identity, because from that comes perception of everything. This says, I am all that is, has been, and ever can be. I am a point of attention within infinite awareness, having an experience. The labels I call my experiences are just that, experiences. This perception says, I am my experience. My experience tells me that I'm just little me, I've got no power, and he tells me what to do. And those two perceptions of self-identity, thus perceptions of the world, create vastly different experiences. One says, who am I? What's going on? And the other one goes, so that's who I really am. And the world and what's going on, we've got no power, creates one where the few can control the many. One where people go, so that's who I really am. That's the worst nightmare of any small group or any group that wants to control others, because that mentality, perception will not be controlled. Why don't I see the world like everyone else? People ask that when they start to wake up. What does wake up mean? Wake up beyond the program. Start to access other levels of possibility, consciousness, intuitive knowing beyond the program. Why does people see it like I see it? Because you didn't see it before because you had the headset on, the program. They've still got the headset on. Doesn't mean they're inferior to you, they've just got the headset on. And therefore they can't see what you can see. That's why people, they start to wake up, people around them who are still in the program, they give them a hard time, they call them crazy, they think they're strange and weird. They cannot literally process what that person is processing. Yep. And this is where we move into this cause and effect interaction with this quantum field of cosmic Wi-Fi. Perceptions are frequencies. Every thought, every emotional state, every perceptual state is a frequency. Hate is a frequency. Love is a frequency. Anxiety, depression is a frequency. And our perceptual frequency band that our perceptions cause us to operate on are interacting and causing us to interact with possibility and probability, the quantum field within that band of frequency. Therefore, our perceptions are dictating the band of frequency, and therefore they're dictating that which we will interact with and decode into an experienced reality. That's why perceptual states that don't change keep repeating life experience. Oh, you'll never guess, it's only happened again. Yes, but your perceptions haven't changed, so it's got to keep happening again. Albert Einstein said, everything is energy, and that's all there is to it. Match the frequency of the reality you want, and you can't help but get that reality. This is an absolute sparkling truth. So if you're operating on a perceptual frequency band, you cannot help but get that reality. You change your perceptual frequency band, you get a different reality, individually and collectively. And this is another great door, gateway opener. Accidents happen, that's what everyone says. But in a quantum universe, there are no such things as accidents, only possibilities and probabilities folded into existence by perception. Our perceptions are dictating the probabilities and possibilities we are manifesting, decoding into experienced reality. So, a world of little me's will be a world where a few control the little me's. Atoms or elementary particles themselves are not real. They form a world of potentialities or possibilities rather than one of things or facts. Perception is what pulls out the possibilities and probabilities into the world of experience, perceived things or facts. And this is the quantum field. We're interacting with it all the time. And if we allow our perceptions to be compressed and suppressed, then we will interact with it at that level and we'll have a life experience to match. Someone who says, I'm just little me, I've got no power, he's got a power, will live a life like that. Because they are interacting with possibility and probability within that tiny, limited band of perceptual frequency. But someone who says, I'm all that his has been and ever can be. I can have a point of attention the size of a pea. George Bush, I rest my case again. Or I can expand my point of attention to encompass all that his has been and ever can be. Because I am whatever I will allow myself to be. That will create a very different life experience. Because the perception is vastly different. Because the interaction is vastly different in its scale and its frequency. How many people, when they start to, happen to me, when they start to awaken from the program, they suddenly start to realize amazing coincidences and synchronicities in their life. Oh my God, fancy seeing you here. What's the chances of that? This is what happens. Why? Because when you expand your interaction with possibility and probability, you are expanding your possibility and probability potential, and thus things that little me could never manifest, suddenly you're manifesting them. And of course, if enough people do that, no way a few people are going to dictate events. They can dictate events when the people are like that. They can't dictate people like that. That's why the awakening, not the woking, the awakening terrifies them. I love that, woke. Where'd that come from? Are you woke? This progressive idea. Are you woke? Oh, woke? Do you go to college? Yeah. What did you study? English grammar. Oh, right. I'm woke, all right. I think you'll find that's awakened in every sense. Oh yeah, what I was going to say. Placebo effect. Placebo effect. More and more drug companies are finding it's harder to have placebo trials because more and more people are being affected by the placebo. What is the placebo? It's something that isn't supposed to have any effect, but people believe it will, and thus it does. Why? Because your perception is that it will have an effect. Because your perception then interacts on that level of frequency perception with possibility and probability, it has that effect because you're creating it, because you perceive it. And this is the power. This is the power of consciousness. You know, I was told when I was 19 and I got arthritis, my football career finished, they said to me, oh, you could be in a wheelchair by the time you're in your 30s. I said, I won't be, mate. I won't be. Because I'm not having it. And I'm now 66. By now I should be crippled up and all that stuff because of where this arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis was supposed to go. And it has never been better, it has never been less trouble to me than decades ago. Because I reached a point where I said, hold on, instead of, let's just make this an intellectual exercise, you control your own reality, make it frickin' happen. I'm not having it. It is not my reality. Because if you can be healed by a placebo that's done nothing except convince you it will, then you can take control of your health. Who says you have to grow old? It's a cycle. It's an illusion, which if you believe it, you will experience it. Same with fire walking. I've seen people walk through fire and not get burned. If you perceive that you walk through fire, you'll get burned, that is the perceptual interaction with all possibility that you set up. Thus, you will burn your bloody feet. But if you go into another level of awareness that does not interact with possibility at that level, you can walk through it without burning your feet, because an illusion can only burn an illusion if you believe it can and perceive it can. This is why, this is the understanding deep in the shadows. They know if they can control human perception individually and collectively, they got them. This is where it's all playing out. This is where we can change it. This is why this apparently insuperable problem that we face is not insuperable. It would be if we had to change it out there in the illusory physical, the world of slowness and limitation. But it ain't. This is just a projection of consciousness and perception. Thus, change perception, we change this with a speed that would beg a belief today. This is Bill Hicks, the great American comedian from the southern states. Oh God, I do wish that guy was still out there doing it now. He said as part of a joke, but he was a very profound man, all matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration. We are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. There's no such thing as death. Life is only a dream, and we are the imagination of ourselves. What a great line. We are the imagination of ourselves. And if I could sum up this conspiracy in one line, it is the hijacking of our perception and imagination of self. That's what it's all about. And we can take that back whenever we choose. Perception is all. Everything comes from it. Everything. So, the idea from those deep in the shadows who understand this stuff is to hijack perception, which means dictating the frequency of interaction, which means dictating our limitation of experience and possibility. The only real revolution is a revolution of perception. Is the only one that will really change anything. Are we going to go on believing in little me and be in awe of a perceived power and authority? Or are we going to realize that we are all there is, has been, and ever can be, having the experience that we can dictate once we realize how it works? And the real I is simply awareness, a state of being aware. The idea of the conspiracy is to isolate points of attention within bubbles of perception. This is why they are subdividing the minutiae of self-identity, because the bubbles are getting smaller, smaller, and smaller. And the bubbles are made up of what we've picked up from postage stamp sources like all of these, and from them formed our reality. But that would be okay if, when other information and possibility came into our hearing or seeing, we gave it a look. But unfortunately, we have the arrogance bubble as well as the perception bubble, where that which sits in its perception bubble dismisses anything outside of it as by reflex action mad or bad. And I'll just go to this very briefly, just as an aside. I have written about this in the books at length. My feeling for a long time now, and this since the turn of the millennium, has been that part of this control system, this perceptual control system, is some form of simulation, which we have been manipulated to decode in the way that, I guess you could symbolize it very simply as a virtual reality game hacking into our reality using the same decoding processes that we would normally decode reality, and therefore overriding them so that we are decoding some kind of virtual reality we wouldn't be if that virtual reality wasn't feeding us this information. And when I started talking about it, just after the turn of the millennium, the only person I knew who was talking about it was a guy called Nick Rostrom at Oxford University. But what's happened in recent years is a stream of mainstream scientists have started to say, well, actually, it does look like this is some kind of simulation. This is a guy called Rich Charill, who came out publicly, talked to a load of media organizations maybe 3 years ago, who said he felt, he's a NASA scientist, you reckon our universe may be a matrix-like computer game designed by aliens. I think that's basically true in the sense that this non-human force I talked about has created this matrix to lock us in a fake reality. So you can start to appreciate why the physics of computer games and our reality are basically the same. This is the findings of a guy called James Gates, who was a science advisor to Obama, and obviously a physicist, etc. And he and a team led a study seeing what evidence there was in the energetic fabric of reality if we were in some kind of simulation. And they say they found computer codes that drive search engines and browsers in the fabric of our reality, energetic fabric of our reality, plus something called error correcting codes, he said, used to stop computer information from miscommunicating. This is a guy called Silas Bean, who led a team at University of Bonn into the question, is the universe a matrix, or at least that part of the universe that we think is the universe that we are decoding. And he decided that, they decided, very good chance it was, and that it was based on a network of cubes, which is why he's holding that structure. So I do think that there is some kind of simulation, and it works basically like this. It operates within a band of frequency, and if our perception, our points of attention, operate only within its band of frequency, then the only perceptual information we're receiving is from the simulation. But once you start to awaken and expand your point of attention beyond the program, beyond this frequency band of simulation, you then start to see beyond it. Whoa, the world looks different, and you can then look in and start to see, hold on a minute, what is this reality? It's my opinion that this narrow band of visual frequency that we can see, which is so ludicrously small, is something to do with attaching us to this matrix. So the Buddha said the mind that perceives the limitation is the limitation, and what was being described there is the same thing. It's the interaction. Perception of limitation becomes a limitation of experience through this cause and effect. Limitless possibility interacts with all possibility and becomes a perception of no limits and an experience of no limits. Oh, I get it. It was me all along. This is so important. What this conspiracy wants is for us to look out there for answers and people to blame, because it knows there is actually no out there as we perceive it, thus we're not going to find answers there. And the other thing is that while we're looking out there for people to blame and why our lives are as they are, we're looking in the wrong direction. You know, it's coming from here, it's coming from our own perceptual state. And this is a projection of that. So, all these people that come into our lives, out of possibility and probability, that we blame for what's going on, it's your fault, it's her fault, it's their fault, it's what she did in 1963, that's why I'm in trouble. What that's doing is blaming projections or attractions of your own perceptual state. Because when your perceptions change, many people in this room will have been aware of this and experienced this. When your perceptions change, suddenly different people come into your life, often synchronistically, and other people go out. Why? Because you're not creating that projection of yourself anymore, so it changes. So the more we look out there to blame, the less we are going to find what is necessary to change what we don't like. And we start looking, because people don't want to take responsibility, but what does responsibility say? Taking responsibility for what happens to us is saying, he's not got control of my life, she's not got control of my life, they've got no control of my life. I've got control of my life, because I've created what I don't like, therefore I have the power to create something I do like. I have the power. Blaming other people is saying, I have no power over my life, they do. And that's exactly what the conspiracy wants, because they know nothing's going to change. So while I expose all these people for what they're doing, they could only do it because of humanity's perceptual state of little me and being intimidated and being manipulated to lose sight of the true I, the true nature of the I. If you don't look in the mirror, everyone else is always to blame, and nothing ever changes as a result. Response dictates what happens next. People say, what happens now? Whatever we choose to happen. Our response will dictate what happens next. If we go on allowing ourselves to be intimidated, allowing ourselves to be perceptually manipulated, to buy all the trinkets and go down the technological road, etc., that they want us to, then what is happening will continue and will get more extreme. If we say we're not having it, we're not having it. You can't say that. Oh really? Just pass me that frickin' megaphone. You have a look if I can say that. That creates a completely different world. So how we respond to whatever in the moment decides what the next moment is. We have the power, but we have to choose to take it. Not make it some esoteric intellectual concept, and to make it a living embodiment of it. Because match the frequency of the reality you want, and you can't help but get that reality. We've got to change the frequency we've been operating on, and thus we'll change the reality it was creating. And another one, cause and effect. If you take shit, you'll get shit. You will. You know, you really will. You know, how many people do you hear about it? Oh, good. be careful about him, he don't take shit. And there's someone over here going, I'll take shit. Oh yeah, okay, well give him the shit. Don't give it him, he don't take shit. Give him the shit. That's what happens. You know, I'm not having it. This is not happening. I'm not accepting this. We dictate, decode our experience. Therefore, we are in control of our experience. What we've got to take control back of is our perceptions, which dictate our experience. Change perception and you change reality every time. And part of that is getting out of the head, out of the intellect. You know, people say the intellect, always got a great mind. Oh, well, you might have a great mind, but has he got an expanded consciousness? Because they're not the same thing. And the intellect has become the arbiter of cleverness, of perceived wisdom and knowingness. And yet, what is the intellect? It is the perceptual consciousness state of the postage stamp. People in postage stamp reality are in awe of people who seem to know an enormous amount about postage stamp reality. That's the intellect, because the intellect is the consciousness level of the postage stamp. That's why the postage stamp society worships the intellect and ridicules consciousness beyond it. This guy, Albert Camus said, an intellectual is someone whose mind watches itself. It's in the program and of the program, and it's going round and round and round and round within the postage stamp, and never breaks the walls into that which is beyond it. And there's this great allegory of the cave by the Greek philosopher Plato, when he was describing reality and the illusory nature of reality. And he described how these prisoners were in this cave, and they were chained up, so all they could see was that one wall of the cave, nothing else. And behind them, they couldn't see, but behind them were fires. And people and animals would walk past these fires, and they would cast shadows on the wall of the cave, the only wall that these prisoners could see. So these shadows on the wall of the cave became the prisoners' reality. And Plato described how some of these prisoners became absolute experts on the shadows on the wall. They're intellectuals today who only see the postage stamp and can't see anything beyond it. And Plato described how one of the prisoners gets away, sees it's all an illusion, comes back and tells them, and they don't like it very much, which is precisely, of course, what happens. And if you look at it, the whole system, the institutions of the system, are run by intellect. What happens, doesn't happen, what's right, what's wrong, is all decided by intellect. And so what they do, they want to put the kids, this is what this program's about, they want to put the kids on the merry-go-round of the intellect from the earliest age and keep them there for the rest of their life until they drop off the other end and another will come in. Get them in, keep them confused, get them out. And keep them in fear, because fear is a low vibrational state which is very, very dense, makes your energy field very dense. So when people are in fear or they're in anxiety, depression, what do they say? Oh, I feel so heavy today. Yes, because the vibrational state is so slow and dense that you feel heavy. And then another day you say, God, you're feeling full of joy, and you say, oh, I feel so light today. Yes, because that frequency of joy is a fast frequency, and it's quickening the energetic field and taking it out of density. So fear, low vibrational density, fear is exactly what they want us to be in. And there is a great escape. Instead of going round and round on the merry-go-round, trying to catch the one in front, you can't, it's rigged. Get off the frickin' thing. Get off it. Go in another direction. And you know, people say, oh, you can't do that because I've got this and I've got that and I've got the other, and how am I going to do this and how am I going to do that? Well, if that's your perception, you won't do it. Because that oh, what am I going to do this? Oh, this won't work. That's interaction, that's experience. See, I told you it didn't work, couldn't be done. When you have the perception, I can step off the merry-go-round and I can have a different life. I can pursue another direction. And you don't think it, you don't hope it, you bloody know it, then that interaction makes it happen. Because you've created it. All this, I can't do it or can't do that, what if? Well, it won't happen then. But you can go beyond it. This is Black Elk, a famous Native American. At the center of the universe dwells the Great Spirit, and that center is really everywhere. It is within each of us. I would go beyond the universe, which is just one expression of reality, and say, though the point is taken, that at the center of everything is infinite awareness in awareness of itself. That level of awareness that is an awareness of its true infinite nature. And that can be tapped into any time we choose. When we ditch the bubbles that hold us in isolation from it. And when you start tapping into that, everything becomes possible, because that is the home of all possibility. When people say all that is, has been, and ever can be, what is that? All possibility. That's all it's saying. Which is why paradoxes are not strange. Within all possibility, something must be and not be. It can and it can't. All the opposites must be there, because it's all possibility. And to reach that level of connection beyond the program perceptions, you need to get out of the head, the intellect, and get into consciousness beyond it. So intellect serves consciousness instead of suppressing it. Out of the head into the heart, this point where we connect out there, where we feel not thought but knowing, intuitive knowing. Why does this know and this think? Because this is in the program, this is connected beyond the program. So this does know, this doesn't know, that's why it has to think and work it out. And very much connected to the heart is the right side of the brain, because the two hemispheres are very different. Because it's holographic, the different, all areas of the brain are impacting on everything, but there are certain specialized areas, and the left and the right brain are very different. What this system wants is left brain people, because left brain people at the expense of the right and the heart are in the program and of the program. So the left brain sees little pictures. It sees dots, it doesn't see pictures. It sees apartness. Everything is apart from everything else. Its mode of communication is thought. And its basic area of dominance is the five senses. Can I see it, touch it, taste it? Oh, it exists there. The right side of the brain, before I go there, it produces the postage stamp scientist and academic. There are scientists and academics that think beyond the program. I'm talking about those that don't. It produces most politicians, most journalists, it's system thinkers. The right side of the brain connects dots. There it sees big pictures. You'll never grasp and understand and uncover how the world is manipulated without using the right brain, because the left brain will not see the connections. It sees the big picture. Its mode of communication is intuition, like the heart, knowing, and its area of operation is the higher senses. It creates the artist, the creative, the out-of-the-box people, those with imagination, the mavericks, and those with imagination. Why does the education system want to shut down imagination? Because imagination takes you out of postage stamp limitation. And look where the education system puts kids. The state education system around the world, and the private education system, come to that, is focused almost entirely on subjects that stimulate the left side of the brain and not the right. This is why you see stories like this, music disappearing from curriculum, school survey shows. They don't want anything that opens this up. And the Heart Math Institute in America which has made us study over years of the power of this heart vortex, the biggest, most powerful vortex in the body, from the center of the chest that throws out this heart field. They say the heart field is 100,000 times more electrically powerful than the brain and 5,000 times more magnetically powerful. This is where the true power is. This has been manipulated to overwhelm that and become the dominant force of perception. The head thinks. The belly feels, another great power center. But the heart knows. Look at the body language. I'm thinking. I know, I just know. And what I've done in my life in the last 30 years is when my intuition tells me, do something, I do it. And I don't think about it, I question it, and what it's done has led me through a maze in the most incredibly synchronistic way, where if this was going, what are you doing that for? That's ridiculous, that. Never would have happened. People think too much, and so know too little. And Albert Einstein said, I never made one of my discoveries through the process of rational thinking. Why? Because you go out into the great library, infinite library of knowledge, knowing, insight. And that's where the inspiration comes from. But if you're in the bubble and of the bubble, that inspiration cannot come because you're not connecting with it. Thinking is a very low level of perception, and it creates bubbles that divide people. Knowing, the heart connects people. If your heart's open, you'll never get into an aircraft and pepper bomb civilians. You cannot do it in that state. In this state, you can justify it. This is a low frequency state. This is what creates this. This is head fighting head. Heart, bring heart into it, none of this could happen. Heart is a high frequency, interacts with possibility and probability at a high frequency, thus creates a different reality. The head is the prison, the heart is the escape. And this needs to become, I suggest as my opinion and my experience, the power center of perception served by this, not dominated by it as it has this far. Because this is connecting with high frequency beyond the program, this cannot be manipulated. This can be manipulated. That's why the head is the target. The longest journey you'll ever make is the journey from the head to the heart, because of the scale of transformation that follows, and also the perceptual transformation that is demanded by that journey. And the Native Americans had this concept, which I've called head and heart, but basically what they were saying, that there are two wolves inside people, they say. One wolf, I call it the head, is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. And the other one is the heart, I call it. The other wolf. Joy, love, peace, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion. Which wolf wins? The Native American saying goes, the one you feed the most. And look at the way that society is structured. That's the one that we are pressured, encouraged, and manipulated to feed the most, because that creates the society which can be manipulated by the few. And you see in so many different areas, religious and cultural, this constant theme through history of two forces tussling for control. And I say one way they express themselves is domination of the head or opening the heart. And people have this war between the head and the heart, between intuition, knowing, I really want to do this, I really feel to do this, and this going, you can't do that, what about that, what are the consequences of that, what about that, what will your mother say, what about the people at work, okay. But when you go with that, despite that, what eventually happens is going with your intuition, it works out. I follow my intuition all the time. I'll get off a plane if my intuition says, hey, I think this is going to be a hassle today, get off it. I'll do it. And that's it. Or I'll get on a plane that other people are saying, oh no, we'll get on that. I'll get on it because I'll think, well, no, I feel good about it. And so but you have this war between the head and the heart. And it's a war of what you feel to do and what you think to do. And the idea, surely, is to bring the two together. So the head and the heart operate in harmony instead of being at war with each other. And it's domination of the head over the heart that's transformed human society, and you take it back to that new psyche I talked about earlier. And actually, before I go there, just give some background to this. I came across, let's go back, one more, go, there you go. I came across this prophecy. Since I started this speaking tour, 2016, of the time in the, I think it was the late 1400s, the prophecy said that in this period, the late 1400s, the head people would dominate the heart people, and society would reflect that. And then, the years it gave, it says during the 1990s, the heart people would start to assert themselves again. And this is not that there is a heart person and there is a head person and they're different. It's those who choose to go with the heart that choose to go with the head. And people can do whatever they choose. And this is the prophecy, and just a very short film. And the reason it said 1990s, that hit me for reasons I'll come to in a sec when it's over. Are we going to get some sound? Are we not going to get sound? Okay, I'll talk you through it. The head people were represented in this prophecy by the eagle, who would dominate after the late 1400s, and the heart people would be basically suppressed. The eagle people would control virtually everything. And then, in the 1990s, the heart people would start to assert themselves. And we would be given the opportunity of the condor, the heart people, and the eagle, the head, flying in the same sky and coming together to create one united consciousness. And why I was hit by that in the 1990s is that in 1990, when I was a television presenter for the BBC and just going on doing things, some things happened to me, and the top of my head blew off. I had some amazing, quote, esoteric experiences, and I ended up in the early 1990s meeting a series of psychics and trying to understand what was happening to my life. And there was a theme that came through to me at that time, that a vibrational change was coming. And from that point, we're talking early 1990, a vibrational change had started, and it was going to get more and more powerful. I would call it an information frequency change now. And it was going to have the effect of acting like a spiritual alarm clock, picking away at what I would call today the program, the coma, and helping people to awake from it. And the other thing that the effect it would have, I was told in 1990, is, and I wrote this book and I called it Truth Vibrations for this reason, was that this vibrational change was going to bring to the surface all that had been hidden from us, so that humanity could see what had been kept from it, and see what had been going on outside of its perception and understanding, how it had been manipulated all this time without knowing it. And that's why I call this book Truth Vibrations, the Truth Vibrations. Now, in 1990, there was no sign at all of anyone waking up in any number. In 1990, well, there was no sign that all that had been hidden began coming to the surface. But look at it now, as we speak in 2019. The number of people of all different walks of life, I mean all over the world, system people, you never think they'd wake up, are doing so. And how much we know now from the hidden that we didn't know in 1990, we didn't know 5 years ago. It's happening. It's happening. And I saw this a few weeks ago. Mainstream media didn't like it. 60% of Britons believe in conspiracy theories. What does that mean? We believe the government frickin' lies to us. That's what they're saying. And that's another expression of this. And so we're at this cusp now, where we go to the left, we can keep going the way we are, and we will enter this global fascist dictatorship. But we go another way. We take another perceptive road, and we'll be able to experience a freedom that people alive today would never have experienced before. And the difference is, are we going to go on identifying with the me we're told to be, or are we going to be the me, the I we really are? And rule number one, our mind is our own, no one else's. We think with it what we choose to think with it, and no one else can dictate to us, or do we allow to dictate to us. And George Orwell said in the book 1984, freedom is the freedom to say that 2 + 2 = 4. If that is granted, all else follows. And the reason that is so important, and we're seeing it now, is if you can say 2 and 2 = 4, then we live in a world of fact. Once you concede for a quiet life and through intimidation, accepting 2 and 2 = 5, when you know it doesn't, we're in a world of no fact. We're in a world of war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. So we need now to stand up and not concede our uniqueness to this. No one can hurt me without my permission. When you truly don't care what anyone thinks of you, you have reached a dangerously awesome level of freedom. You can only reach that level by not caring what other people think of you. I love being me. It pisses off all the right people. You'll never change the world by being what you want to change. We need to be what we'd like the world to be. You want to change, then we must fight. Oh yeah, that will change everything. Oh, let's hate the people we say are haters. Yeah, that'll change everything. Pushing us into the 5 senses. Postage stamp revolutions, we've drowned in them, where one group of the same perceptual state replaces another and nothing changes because the perception's not changed. We must protest, okay, fine. But if people protest and then go home and just carry on as before, nothing's going to change. As Martin Luther King said, the power of non-violent non-cooperation. There's 7.5 billion people. The number of people knowingly manipulating is a handful. Non-violent non-cooperation with that handful, that system, will mean it cannot function. Non-violence means avoiding not only external physical violence, but also internal violence of spirit. You not only refuse to shoot a man, you refuse to hate him. We don't need to hate people. We don't need to hate those that are manipulating us. We need to stop cooperating with them. The first principle of non-violent action is that of non-cooperation with everything humiliating. What is more humiliating than putting on a different face that is not the real you because you think that's acceptable to different people and situations? We are who we are. We are our unique point of attention. We should express it. And if people don't like it, well, they can do the other thing, that's fine. But this is us. We're not living some lie with off the peg faces and personalities. No more fake gods. No more bowing to these authorities. I mean, this bloke's bowing to a woman in a frickin' hat because she's called a queen. If she was called a toilet cleaner and he was called the king, he'd be bowing to him. It's madness. It's all madness, this conceding our uniqueness and our self-identity to these fake self-appointed authorities. No more giving our power away to other people. Take it back. Have a unique perspective on life, not someone else's hand-me-down. And this is a classic, this. This is a Nazi rally. And these people, these soldiers and these civilians, they go way back into the distance. And they are controlled and dominated by a handful of people, ultimately one man, in the middle of that circle. And this is the dynamic. He has no power other than individual power. The power he has to control them is what they give to him to control them, and what they give to him to enforce what he wants upon them. In other words, those being dictated to are the vast majority. The people doing it are the tiny, tiny minority. When that stops cooperating with that, it's over. And if we switch that picture upside down, look where it takes us. It's the Hunger Games society. This is the structure of the Hunger Games society, the very same. And the same principle is, again, relevant. When that stops giving its power to that has no power. And we need to start. And of course, what happens is we're manipulated to fight among ourselves to diminish that collective power. I have no power unless you give me yours, exactly. You will obey. You will obey. I won't. You will. I won't. Do it. Where's the power? You come out of a meeting. We've had a meeting. White House, wherever. This is what's going to happen. That's not what we're doing it. They have no power. Their power is in our acquiescence. No pawns, no game. We are all in this together. This is the point. The way they can stop this is by dividing the target population in on itself. Dividing and ruling on race and religion and politics and men and women and sexuality, young and old, phone and phone. And as they want to drive us apart, surely the answer to remove the cause of the problem is to come together. To come together irrespective of these fault lines. Because what they want us to do is perceive each other as groups, not individual behavior, irrespective of race and religion, but to judge people only on their group. This group, good, say nothing about it. That group, bad, say what you like about it. And it's another level of divide and rule we must not concede to. Joseph Goebbels, propaganda must facilitate the displacement of aggression by specifying the targets for hatred, and that's what we have. And currently, it's white supremacy and white privilege. Question, are some people privileged because they're white? Yes. Are some people in some countries privileged because they're not white? Yes, just the same. But is this white privilege? This is what happens when you judge people by groups and by race and not by individual behavior and individual circumstance. This is a guy in trouble. Not a white guy in trouble, not a black guy in trouble, a white guy, a guy in trouble, irrespective of race. And I saw this, NBC goes full racist, says the problem with America is white women. I said in this meme, look at the bloody dog next. It's crazy, and it's part of this process of dividing and ruling us and creating targets for hatred. You don't delete racism by reversing it. You delete it by not seeing it, but seeing the individual consciousness and its behavior and perceptions are not the vehicle that it is occupying, which is irrelevant. And if we could just do that, if we could just see beyond the labels, everything will change. Labels enslave us, seeing beyond them is what will set us free. That's why they want us to go down this identity politics. We are all, no matter what our background, infinite awareness experiencing itself. All of us. And if we come from that perspective and realize we're all expressions of the same one I, everything changes. When humanity remembers we are all one consciousness having different experiences, the illusional fault lines that divide us will fall and peace will come. And only will come when we stop identifying with labels. Human condition in one word, unconscious. The answer in two, becoming conscious beyond mind. I woke up. What does that mean? It means you open up beyond the program and let the true I in to express itself in this world of current madness. To ditch the postage stamp perception and become the true I expressing itself in a human experience. This is the revolution. No, 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 no. This is the revolution. This is the revolution. And at last, its time has come. Thank you very much. Happy New Year.